Okay. Sorry we're a little late, gang. We just had some technical difficulties we were trying to sort through, but we are here and we are ready to rock your world with yet another WhickTV panel. A WhickTV, as you all know by now, is a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both silly and serious, political and cultural, and today we're going to be discussing lolicon and the community's response to those who enjoy it. We've assembled a team today. The lineup has changed just a little bit from the original one, so please bear with me, gang. But we have some excellent debaters here who are going to go in and talk about this. It's a subject that is recently relevant to us, for better or worse. Rather than introduce the topic as I normally do and potentially misframe it, I am going to give the mic over to 𝕾𝖍𝖎 here, who is the one that wanted me to set this up and put this panel together. They have something that they want to argue, and rather than misrepresent them, I'd like to give them the chance to start us off. So 𝕾𝖍𝖎, apologies. There you go. Your mic's yours. Give us your
It's o
thoughts.
it's okay. My name can be difficult to pronounce. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. So, the reason why I was interested in arguing on this panel today is not because I am pro lolly or a lolly enjoyer. I believe that it is immoral. However, it is a free speech issue for me. There is also no concise, well, not, I shouldn't say concise, but no peer-reviewed data that says that people that consume lolicon alone as a factor are more likely to be pedophiles or to abuse children, in the same vein that violent video games are not correlated with making people more violent. I'm really disappointed in how this topic has been handled overall by this space. I think it's not taken very seriously, and we need to take these accusations incredibly seriously. When we accuse people of abusing children or being pedophiles without ample evidence, we're confusing the public about what a predator looks like and what abusive behavior looks like. I also want to educate some people on what that looks like today. I have a little bit of professional training in that area. And let's get going with everybody else.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you reaching out, and we'll see how it goes. With that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Fairy Queen, then we're going to Joe, and then we're going to end with Malcolm. Fairy Queen, give it a go.
Sure. I'm going to go really quick because I'd like to get to the back and forth. So, I'll restate what I said last week regarding Vaush. I think that the community does need to slam Vaush specifically to the curb for what happened recently. And that's for two reasons, just outside of whatever it is you think of Vaush. Number one, when we allow people who have clear signs and a clear track record of sexually harassing people and watching or consuming, at the very least, we'll call it problematic, even though really it's pedophilic pornography. It sets the danger of like tolerating his presence could potentially like set up ignite a beacon to attract other people who also consume lolly, who are also likely to be child molesters, who now believe that because we will tolerate Vaush's presence, that we will also tolerate their presence in our communities, which therefore presents a clear and present danger to other people who exist within Twitch poll within these spaces. The second reason why is because by refusing to not take this seriously, it sets a precedent for future victims when they come forward. That if the person that they are accusing of, even if they have incontrovertible evidence, even if they have screenshots, even if they have logs, that are beyond disprovable, that if the person has enough clout, has enough professional connections, has enough friends, has enough money, has enough subscribers, that the greater community of Twitch poll will ignore that and will choose to side with the person who is being abusive or who is choosing to be harassing as opposed to the victims. And finally, like the last 3 points. I specifically today want to focus on a danger of lolly that I don't often hear talked about, which is that I think that lolly specifically is dangerous because it encourages children to be abusive themselves towards other children, We don't often talk about that as a potential risk, but I think that specifically because it's a cartoon, it normalizes the idea for it means it's more likely for children to access it because they think they're accessing a game or they're accessing a web comic, which means they're more likely to see inappropriate sexual relationships, which means they're more likely to enact that within their own lives. Secondly, Lolly specifically is evil because it incentivizes a business that is used to molest children. And something I think we will get into later on is one of the great evils of child pornography is not simply the fact that pedophiles or child molesters use it for their own self gratification. It's that child pornography is used by people who want to molest children to show it to children, to normalize the idea to children that sexual contact between adults and between children is normal. And so by choosing to and so if you are a person that goes online and chooses to watch or to consume Lolly, every click that you put on that website incentivizes that business in the algorithm. It means that that picture, that content is more likely to be used and to be consumed by other people, including and especially children. And finally, which we will get into later, Lolly is arguably not a form of protected free speech in the United States. I know why you say that. We can go through the Supreme Court decisions upon why people believe that, and there is a slight exception, there's a hiccup to it, but without question, Lolly is federally illegal in the United States, and therefore I don't think that the freedom of speech exception applies here.
Okay, well, that was a short intro, gang. Thanks for being here. No, we'll get into it, and we'll see how it goes. Next up, Joe, give us what you got.
Thank you, Wick. No, I came into this with no intention of picking a particular side because all I know of Vaush is horse porn, and now all I know of Vaush is lolly and horse porn. So I don't really have a dog in this fight other than finding it quite amusing that he was caught. But what I do have is some stats, so I just want to list them off. Twilight Sparkle, 19,000. Fluttershy, 15,000. Rainbow Dash, 14,000. Rarity, 12,000. Pinkie Pie, 12,000. Applejack, 11,000. Link from the Legend of Zelda, also 11,000. Now, these are stats of pornographic images found on a popular site for basically collecting pornographic images of fictional characters. And these are the highest ranked fictional characters as far as the amount of pornography that has been produced based on them. And if you notice, I mean, I had to do some research to find this out, but the top 6 are all cartoon horses. And I want to question, why are so many people jerking off to cartoon horses? And I think when we get a bit more into the lolly question, it will become somewhat relevant.
Joe, to be clear, and I hope I was clear, maybe I wasn't, but you are here to defend either Vaush or consumers of lolly or lolly in general.
I will, if you like. I'm quite happy to. I feel this guy. I feel if it's a 2-on-1, I'm happy to provide backup for the 1.
2v2. Okay, this is why you were invited. So if you're comfortable doing that, okay, whatever. It's gonna be one of those nights, gang. Malcolm, please, what you got?
Yes, sir. So I am essentially on the same page as Fairy Queen, probably for a different reason, but that's fine, as long as we have the same goal in mind. I personally do not think that we go hard enough at all on consumers of lolly, primarily because people like this have no problem just kind of talking about the degenerate, like, disgusting, foul shit that they're into so publicly and openly. And it's what it comes down to is that they ultimately think that kids are hot. So people saying, like, brazenly, I think kids are hot, I want to fuck them. I think that definitionally makes somebody a pedophile. It doesn't matter to me that it's drawn. It doesn't matter to me that it's simulated. The fact that the interest of your sexual desire is a child, that is evidence enough for me that you are a pedophile. And if you consume that material for, like, sexual pleasure, you are a pedophile. A big issue with the entire discourse, I think, is there's no element of shame around people being very open about their, like, pornographic interests, especially when it includes things like lolicon or, in the case of Vaush, horse fucking, short stack goblin porn. All of this is, like, fucking gross and weird. But particularly in food shops, the issue again is like that she has this like attraction to children, and she said repeatedly that she doesn't have a desire to not be into kids. Where it's like, well, do you even care that you're into lolly, or do you want to not be into lolly? And she says, no, I don't care, I don't mind, I'm into it. I think kids are hot, and I'm going to keep being into it. Additionally, a big reason that I wanted in on this, and a big reason why I kind of have a horse in the race, no pun intended, with this kind of discourse is there are surprisingly and disgustingly to me a lot of trans people in the current political climate that think that it's appropriate to defend the consumption of lolly or imply that these people that consume drawn depictions of children being raped is somehow not indicative of pedophilic intent. And so I think that the people that are trans that are willing to do this are just absolutely fucking disgusting and abysmal. And in general, defending this behavior and this kind of pornographic consumption is disgusting, but I think that it is exceptionally disgusting when it comes from trans people. And I find it really upsetting that there's no counterbalance, that the people that are platformed in regard to this issue are people that are degenerate, scum-feeding fucks who think that it's okay to jerk off to kids getting raped. I think that really at the end of the day, everybody would agree that we wouldn't let somebody who watches lolly like babysit our kids, like work at a daycare. And that isn't because, oh, well, the argument is it's just a drawing. They're not really pedophiles. What is the uncomfortable part with allowing a lolly consumer around kids? It's because the target of their sexual interest is children. It's not that they might offend. It's not that they're going to offend. It's that they are horny from children, and we want to keep those people away from children because definitionally someone who gets off to children is a pedophile, and that's pretty much what I think the big issue is with it.
Okay, and with that, we'll get into open discussions. If you have a problem getting in, or if you feel like you're being talked over, either raise your hand. If you don't have a camera, you can DM me, and I will try to make sure that you have your voice heard. So I guess I'll start us off by just directing the question to to 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜's side here. Given the stances about heard by Fairy Queen and Malcolm here, where do you disagree in that? Right? Where is the point of disagreement that you're like, no, they're wrong, and I want to fight them on it? Go ahead.
In regards to Malcolm, I think it's interesting that you group the consumption of lolly with also the glorification of it. I think that there's a big difference between somebody that consumes that kind of material and doesn't say anything or doesn't promote it versus your example with food shops where, like, yes, she is promoting pedophilia to some degree by putting her preferences out there in a way that's not very critical and in a way that's irresponsible. However, for example, in the case of Vaush, well, you can point to other questionable sexual things he's done. There's no association with minors or any lolicon promotion going on there, or at least none that I've seen. And I'd be curious actually to see what. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your name. Not Malcolm, but
Fairy Queen?
Fairy Queen. Thank you.
Yeah, you could just call me Fairy. It's fine.
Okay, and I'm just curious as to what Fairy's data is on this, because as far as I understand it, there needs to be more than just one indicator. And more serious indicators are, for example, people that try to isolate children, try to cultivate an audience of children that they can manipulate, already have, sketchy associations with children. So, well, I do believe it's very good to criticize those people and to essentially ban them from these spaces, either literally or via shaming. I don't see how that would apply in a case of someone that doesn't have those associations or doesn't have those other warning signs, but accidentally revealed their porn folder.
So, does Malcolm want to go first, or I can go? It doesn't matter.
You go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, so a couple of things. So, what is my data on this? Like, what is more than a serious indicator? Like, people who try to isolate and manipulate children, good to criticize those people. How does this apply to someone who has those warning signs? So, There are a couple of things that I want to really hit a home on the freedom of speech thing, because that's a key part of like what you said in your opening statement, but we can put that off to the side because that's not your question to me, okay? As far as like serious indicators, so you're right. So the things that you're talking about, like being close to children, having a job close to children, those are indicators that we look for a person in real life, okay? So if this person was my neighbor, okay, if this person was my boss, if this was somebody that I knew in real life, then the indicators that you're speaking about, that you're talking about, would absolutely apply. In this case, because we are in an online platform, the only thing that we can do is take the indicators that we can see. And here are the indicators that we know. We know that Vaush sexually harassed a woman whose name was Poppy for approximately, so many can correct me, but I believe it was over a course of years. After he was exposed for sexually harassing this young woman, and he was exposed on Destiny's stream. He was banned from Destiny's Discord. He made tons of excuses saying that you have to look at the context. And when Steven looked at the context on stream, he still kept making excuses about still look at the context. And he, even afterwards, he barely apologized for it and seemed to take little to no responsibility for it. But somehow he still had his career and people allowed him to go forth. Then there's the indicator of him making the analogy between the very famous, child pornography is no worse than any other item or product that's created by child slavery. That was a point of discourse that he had for a number of years. He said that it was for intellectual purposes. We can talk more into that, but that's a bit of a weird comparison to make. And finally, there is the indicator of the fact that he has this folder. And I want to talk specifically about the folder because you asked me specifically about data. So I'm looking right now. So this, just so that everybody is very clear what this is. This is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. This is Child Molesters and Behavioral Analysis. And this was published in 1992 alongside the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigations. One of the things that they say, first of all, there's not just one type of person that that sexually molests children. It's not true that all people who are child molesters are all pedophiles. So you have child molesters in one category, and you have people who are capital P pedophiles in a separate category. There are many people who molest children simply because they have access to it, but wouldn't necessarily be diagnosed as pedophiles. By contrast, it's also true that there are different subtypes of people who molest children. I'm going to go over, if you don't mind, I'll go over like what those four subtypes are according to this. The first one is the situational child molester. So this is not somebody who has a true sexual preference for children, but somebody who engages with children for varied and sometimes complex reasons. This is the once in the lifetime kind of guy. The second kind is the morally indiscriminate person. This is a person who has sex with everyone regardless. He cheats on his wife. He will have sex with his boss. This is a person who is probably pretty likely to be a sexual offender to adults.
Go ahead.
3, sexually indiscriminate. This is somebody who, like in common discourse, would be known as a trisexual. So this is somebody who will quite literally have sex with anything or anyone at any time. And the reason like why they go and they consume lolly is not because they have a particular predilection for it specifically. It's because they will consume quite literally anything indiscriminately. And finally, there is inadequate. So this is a person who's kind of the loner, somebody that's off to the side, doesn't have a lot of friends, is socially isolated, and choose to sexually act out on children because they view them as less of a threat. So when you're asking me like what indicator this is, I would say based off of his extreme openness about his like as Malcolm mentioned about his like sexual predilections, what he's talked about, he sounds to me like somebody who like pretty much goes onto a porn site and clicks on everything and doesn't really care about what is there. I don't think there's any kind of moral filter or compass, like based off of like what we've seen, based off of the logs. Finally, like another indicator, you mentioned, for instance, the folder, just the folder. Let's talk about the folder. This is something that this report specifically mentions that is unique to people specifically who tend to be child molesters or who tend to be pedophiles. And that's that they don't just view it. They typically speaking, they do not just view child pornography, and they typically don't view child erotica, which is what lolly is. They save it. They specifically save it. They download it to their computers and they keep it in a folder. That's strange. And not only do they keep it, but typically speaking, they have tons of paraphernalia. They will collect, it's gross to say, but they will collect toys. They will collect clothes. They will collect one part of this report that talked about when the FBI broke into a potential pedophile's home. They found 27 binders full of pictures of children, like within each of these binders. So when we're talking specifically about people who are child molesters and people who have a predilection for this, the sheer fact that Vaush has a folder and that he has a folder indiscriminately of not just horse porn, but also especially the lolly, is an indication more than likely that this person is probably somebody to look out for. His response afterwards is an indication that he's probably somebody to look out for. And that's my short answer. Now, when you say
That's
data,
your
are you
short
asking
answer?
for?
Damn. Okay,
That's
go
my.
ahead.
I'm sorry, it's a lot, but there's a reason I
enough.
wanted to go
Yeah.
through it because the
When you have
folder
a second,
seems
if I
important.
can jump in too, just so we're not like slamming 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 with like a ton of shit. If you,
I'll go
Yeah,
for it.
you-
Go for it.
yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, you go next,
Okay.
Malcolm.
Okay. There's a few things that I wanted to add on really quick. So like one thing that I want to frame that I think is really important when we talk about this conversation, like when we're talking about the specifics between like, the difference between somebody who's a pedophile, somebody who's like a child molester, somebody 𝕾𝖎𝖎𝖙, pedophilia, like all this shit. I think that like we exist here in this little like bubble here, all sharing space together on this Discord server. We need to zoom way the fuck out really quick for like 1 second. If you went up to some random person on the street and you showed them a picture of like Vaush's goon folder where it's like a horse fucking a big tit anime girl with a lolly like rimming the horse's asshole, and you were like, hey, do you think this is child porn? They would probably just fucking kill you. Okay, so like the reality is that when we live in this little bubble right here, we have disgustingly normalize like a lot of this kind of like goon, like porn, sick shit. And when we're talking in the context of pedophilia, it's important to like keep a frame of reference that like it really is. It doesn't matter when the target of the sexual affection is a child. Like that is definitionally pedophilia. So it doesn't matter about the semantics about like, well, did he molest a kid? Well, does he have the propensity to molest a kid? It's like colloquially in almost every single fucking country in the entire history of the galaxy, if you think kids are hot, you're a fucking pedophile, and that's kind of the end of the discussion from there. And additionally, in the context of Vaush as well, he has said previously when he made that video, the context that he provided actually, like, somebody made a hit piece on him. His editor fucked him so hard with that. He gave previously advice how to avoid lolly on these websites where he was consuming like anime porn and shit, where he was like, you have to be careful not to accidentally download lolly. I've accidentally downloaded lolly. He said that one time he accidentally liked lolly when he was looking at porn in between classes. Like, what the fuck is that about? Like, he is very acutely aware that when he is perusing these websites, that this is a type of content that he needs to avoid. Still somehow managed to have tagged lolly on his computer. And it goes beyond that as well. I know that like the horse fucking thing is just kind of like a funny meme and like kind of weird or whatever. But like there are logs of him asking about bestiality in Reddit discords. And
Yeah.
there was that weird thing where he put like his lizard on his dick and he said it felt like a hand job. Like it is just like the collection of evidence where it's like you have people that continually demonstrate like weird antisocial, like fucking sexually degenerate and like dangerous behavior. And then we're stepping back and we're like, well, is it fair for us to say that this person is a pedophile? Or is it fair for us to say that this person is into bestiality? And should we go hard on them because they just had a little oopsie goon folder leak? It's like, yes, absolutely. Like if this was somebody that I needed to take care of my horse farm, you couldn't pay me enough money in the fucking world if you showed me the shit that was in their fucking goon folder. Or if I needed a babysitter the last second so I could go to a concert, I would trust Casey Anthony before I trusted Vaush or food shops around my fucking kid. Just because of the consumption habits that they have, it indicates that the target of their sexual affection is either an animal or a child. And that is the problem. It's not about it being drawn. It's not about it being a fantasy or whatever the fuck. It's that is the target of their sexual affliction, which definitionally makes them a pedophile or like into bestiality.
This has been a lot, and I want to give some time to the other side to respond to all that. That's only fair. So Joe and 𝕾𝖍𝖎, a lot has been said. Take your time. Do with it as you will. Either one, go ahead.
Okay, shall I start with this? Because a lot's been said, which makes it a pain to respond. About 10 minutes in, I decided I should start taking notes. So first of all, I'm sorry, but having saving pornography to a folder is actually very normal. You can't connect that to somebody who's collecting like people's clothes and stuff. I'm sorry, that's just not that unusual. Now, personally, I found Vaush's folder pretty hilarious. I've censored the funniest image if anyone wants me to briefly share it.
Do not share it. Do not share it on stream. Do not.
I've blurred out the dick.
It doesn't matter. Do not. Okay, carry on.
It was very. It's quite. Yeah, it's quite. That was quite amusing to me. Just to get like, geez, what is this guy fantasizing about? But no, first of all, I want to say, if you're going to talk a lot about lolly distribution, you basically have to talk about Japanese pop culture and how much of it we should start banning, because Japan has a massive thing with pretty huge AAA or whatever you want to call it stuff having heavily sexualized images of characters who are below the American age of consent, sometimes disgustingly low below, but it is massive. You will end up basically like, does anyone know what Berserk is? Because I've made a whole video complaining about Berserk, but that was basically on the principle of people are in denial about what it contains.
Okay,
but try
I want to
going
get.
into.
Hold on, Joe. I hate to interrupt, but can we focus on the Goon folder, Vaush specifically, and the situation specifically? We could talk about anime and Japanese pop culture in context with that, but I want to just focus in on the topic at hand, please.
Okay, so it's got to be Vaush. Okay, this doesn't make it easy. Do you want to? Someone else want to drop on for a bit?
I just want to
Really quickly, I would just like to say that saying that Japanese culture is pedoculture is like not the sweep that you think it is. That's definitely not the move. But sorry, go ahead.
And I'm quite happy to make that part of the move, because it's certainly a
That's
subject
okay.
we can
That's
get
good.
onto. But it
That's all right.
doesn't really go that well with, oh, it would just be pedophile in any country, because countries range a lot. Generally, if you're talking Hungary, e.g. a shitty country, 14 is not a child. But then Hungary is a shithole run by a shithole. But, you know.
Hello, FBI.
Keldo.
I just want to piggyback on the point about Japanese culture. So, Japan is, interesting enough, ranked higher than a lot of Asian countries for child safety. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have an issue with lolicon or with sexual abuse of children, because, we can still have, lower average rates of these things while them still being a problem. And then if you look at more restrictive countries, like, for example, Russia, they're far more dangerous for children. And so I'd think that if you could draw a line directly between, lolicon consumption and abusing children, or it being indicative of someone that has a high likelihood of abusing children, I would think that you would see more abuse in Japan, but that's not what we're seeing right now. I do know that there has been a slight uptick since the pandemic. However, prior to that, the rate of sexual abuse in Japan had been going down since the 1980s, I believe.
That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. So, do you have a source?
Do I have a source for that? Yeah, just let
Yes.
me bring it up.
So I have
The
a source that says something. So I have a source that says something completely different. So I'm right now, and I
I'm
can.
using is here's how every country ranks when it comes to child abuse.
Here, DM me the
It
source and I'll DM it
is-
to Fairy Queen. How's that?
Oh, okay.
Please.
Here,
That
and I'll
sounds good.
DM. Actually, it would be better if we had like a. Can you make the? I'm just gonna drop it into the YouTube chat otherwise, because here
Okay,
I'd
yeah,
like
drop
everybody
your
else.
links into the YouTube chat or the Twitch chat or whatever you like as well. So
Oh,
by
I
all
don't
means, share it.
have. Well, I'll send it to you and then you can drop it.
Fair enough.
I can probably find it as an image and just post it.
Either way, get your sources in and I'll share them with the group.
Is there a text chat
But-
for this? Yeah, there is.
But finish, please. Finish your thought while we do that, and then we can let the other side respond.
Can I send it into the pit?
I don't know if you can. You might need perms. I don't know.
Did that happen?
Just DM it to me, and I'll make sure everyone gets it. How's that? Easy.
All right. I just have to switch my scenes over. But no, that was really. I'm just curious as to what your data is then, because I just didn't find that.
Sure. So I just dropped it in the YouTube chat. If you go to WhickTV, if you go to the chat there and you pull it up,
Okay,
and
you're
you
gonna
can
have to
look at.
DM it to me because it didn't show up in the YouTube chat for anyone else. Please.
It didn't show up in the YouTube chat for anyone else.
Gotcha, and I don't know how to change that right now. So DM it to me
Okay.
and I'll post it.
Okay. Let me go over here. I'm gonna post this, but while I'm posting this to, while I'm sending this to Wick, here, Just sent
I'm
this
also
to you.
going to send something to you, Wick, really quick, because Japan legalized CP material in like the 90s, and like sex crimes have like exploded since
Yep.
that was legalized. So I'm going to DM this to you as well, so you have this one too. This is
Yeah.
just like not true.
Yeah. So I'll just describe like what I'm looking at right here for those of you like when Wick posts, I'm looking at a graph here. And the graph is, and just to be very clear, the study was created by Fukushima Medical University. It's by, and what it's documenting is the recent trend of sexual abuse in Japan. And what it specifically looks like, so according to this, and this is total child abuse. Okay, so this is not child sexual abuse, the number I'm about to give you, but the next one is child sexual abuse. So the number of reported cases of child abuse in Japan, according to the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare, in 2012, it increased 5.7 times compared to the number in 1999. The child abuse prevention law was enacted in 2000. So that means that even when it was apparently enacted, it still rose. Specifically with sexual abuse. So if you look down here, so if you look all the way down here, you can see a clear, steady trend from 1998 all the way up to 2013 for the number of reported cases of child sexual abuse, again, from 1998 to 2013. I know why you're specifically saying that, 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙. I think what you're referring to is the overall rate of violent crime or the overall rate of rape or child sexual abuse in Japan as compared to the overall rate total of the entire United States. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay. So there are a couple of things with that. So one of the problems with that, so let's just focus specifically on what you asked earlier, which is whether or not the legalization of lolicon, whether or not its availability has any impact on whether or not like child sexual abuse is more or less common. So I looked at like the actual rates of like sexual assault across different countries, and what I found was that the legalization of it is actually has an inconsistent data. So if you look, for instance, at Sweden, Sweden has one of the highest rates of sexual assault. It's huge if you look at it. I can actually pull up
Just
the number here in a moment. But and that is a
sorry.
country in which lolicon is legal. But right above it, you could see there. I think it's. I'm not sure if it's Botswana or if it's South Africa. It's lolicon is illegal, and yet the rates of child sexual abuse and the rates of rape are indeed high as well. And so the idea that there is in fact this documented correlation between the legality of lolicon in one place and low rates of child sexual abuse and low rates of sexual assault, I don't see that consistency. I don't see that consistency when we look at like different countries en masse. That doesn't seem to be true.
I just have to jump in on Sweden because I hear this a lot regarding Sweden, and the response I've always heard is, yeah, that's because Sweden counts a lot more stuff as sexual assault than most countries do.
That was the
So
point I was going to jump in and make, is that don't they have a very comprehensive like definition of that, so therefore it's going to be detected more often. But I mean that's a side thing, but
If you bite that bullet, then you're going to have the similar problem with Japan because if I'm not mistaken, Malcolm, you can correct me on this. The federal legal age of consent in Japan is 13 years old.
I'm
We
sorry,
know,
that
yeah,
that
we know
kind
you're
of
gonna you are going to have the same problem.
One at a time.
can I
sorry,
explain
sorry.
that?
One time. 13 years old is your claim, to be clear, Fairy Queen?
But federally speaking, across the nation of
Federally,
Japan. Now,
in
what
Japan,
Joe is
13.
what Joe is about to
Well,
say is he's about to say that there are different, I think, states and counties where the
let's let him
legal age
say
is
it,
actually
though.
16. But
Let's let him say it, then you can respond. So go ahead, you Joe, then Doge, then we'll go to Fairy Queen again. Go ahead.
Yeah, that basically, yeah, it's a similar thing a lot of Europe has, where you will see what looks like a very low age of consent, but actually that basically just means if two 13-year-olds fuck each other, that's probably not going to be a deal. On the other hand, if an 18-year-old fucks a 13-year-old, then that's just illegal. So it's not the same. Basically, that's my understanding of the situation. Japan has since changed the law, so it's just flat out illegal regardless of age, though, I believe. Although I'm not sure what the new consent thing is, might be 16.
so the new consent is 16, and that's per about according to the source I'm looking at here, according to PBS, that was per June 16th of 2023. Like this past summer, the legal age of consent was raised in Japan. And you're not wrong that that's true, but the problem is that concurrent with that low age of consent that exists within Japan, and you also have a culture of prostitution, which is technically illegal, but is still culturally accepted, particularly with young girls. You have a culture where lolicon is culturally accepted and culturally on. You can literally there. I think I saw a picture of a small child, like was scantily clad on the back on a billboard next to a subway station. This is something that is heavily normalized throughout the culture of Japan.
Oh,
And
yes, it
finally,
absolutely is.
and finally, the point about the fact that Sweden simply counts like more things as sexual assault, you are going to have the opposite problem when it comes to Japan, which is that trying to file for sexual assault, trying to file for rape, trying to sue somebody for sexually abusing your child is far more difficult in Japan. And that means that the actual number of people that have been sexually assaulted or who have experienced that is actually probably far greater than we actually know. So you are going to have the exact same problem if you're trying to track that difference between Japan and between Sweden.
Well, because when
Okay, I
Sweden
think
changed their laws, they changed it to just mean that you're criminalizing sex without consent. So like it doesn't have to be like violent rape or anything like that. They're categorizing like if, like you have sex with your wife but she's like not in the mood, which is still like categorically rape. They just categorize it differently. And one of the big issues in Japan, like we have all heard the horror stories of like women in Japan, like they have a rampant culture of like sexual misconduct towards women or women. So the one of the big issues with this is like if we're comparing two countries that have totally different ways of how they classify this, it's hard to say like this is why this is happening or why this isn't happening, right?
Okay, I think the issue I have here is we are basically comparing two extremes at this point. I think, for example, Japan's rate of, say, sexual assault compared to the States, I absolutely would agree, for example, that Japan has a big thing where it's a lot harder to get something basically passed into the legal system. It's why they have such a high conviction rate when you hear about the 99% conviction rate. A lot of it is that the actual rate of things being pushed through is far lower, although then again when you consider that in the UK it's like what 1 in 50 rapes ever reaches the court. But at the same time, the gulf in size between, say, Japan's rate and America, I think, is just too big to say, oh, that's just the thing. If we assumed they had the same rate as in the States, they would be closer. I just don't
I
believe
want
it.
to respond briefly, but then I want to bring this back. Go ahead.
Me respond briefly.
Yep,
So
briefly.
again, my answer to you again is according at least to the data that I have, the reported number of child sexual abuse cases has actually risen, at least according to what I've seen. And I haven't seen like whether or not Malcolm's data, but I'm assuming like it reflects the same thing. And as far as like rates of like sexual abuse, like regarding children, this is something that a problem that I have with people that like want to argue about lolly, which is that you don't get to have it both ways, right? So if it's the case that, so if you want to say that in a society where lolly is legal, where people can have it and have free access to it, that you can see a clear decrease between the rates of child sexual assault, that would mean that the countries that in fact that are the most permissive of it should have the absolute lowest rates of it. But I don't think that that's true, at least according to what I've seen. The rates of actual child sexual abuse are actually higher than in comparison to the United States. When I'm looking at this, I'm looking currently at this chart, and it seems like the overall rates of child sexual abuse have actually decreased over time in the United States, as opposed to the rates in Japan, which they've increased. And so the fact that there are in fact more cases in the United States as opposed to Japan, that could simply be because of a population difference. It could be, it could have
I'm
something.
pretty sure. I think that things will probably take into account population difference. But I mean, lolly is a lot more
Do you have
legal
any
in the
sources?
US.
Do you have any data to support that? Do you have any sources to back that up?
No, I just think it's usually when
Okay, then we have to
I'm
then we have
sorry,
to go with what the actual data says,
most
dude.
stuff does take into account population. It's rare
But you
unless
like
it's
what?
really bad
Drop a
stats.
source.
Dude, I didn't prepare. I didn't
really
prepare to debate this exact thing. I don't see a source either. I'm
I
just saying.
understand. Okay, so
Okay.
let's
No,
bring
I
this.
just wanted to bring
I'm
out
going to-
that
please,
the
please,
US
please.
is
Everyone,
far
please.
more
Right now.
liberal when it comes to basically
Everyone.
child sexualization than the UK. For example, the US is actually one of the most permissive societies when it comes to that.
We'll get
I don't
into
know
it.
what that says. I'm just bringing it up.
Okay, Joe, we'll get into it. Let me read this super chat, and then I have a question to maybe get things back on track, because I think these are all pertinent, but I think we're missing the point of the whole discussion here, and I want to kind of recenter us if we can. Let me read the super chat, and then we'll get to it. $10 from Yunin to say saying someone who consumes lolly is correlated to consuming CP is like saying someone who kills people in a video game is correlated to killing someone in real life. Soccer mom fear mongering all over again. Thank you for the $10. We can respond to it in a second. I see you, Fairy Queen. I promise you. You can respond to that in a second. But what I want to ask the chat, because we have a real issue in the streamer space right now, right? We're talking all these stats and figures about countries and things like that. I want to recenter it on this space, right? On Twitch poll, commentary community, RedTuber, whatever you want to call this space, right? I want 𝕾𝖍𝖎 and Joe, if they can, to just delineate what it is you think we've done wrong in this space towards people who have these accusations, lolly consumers, etc. Like, what's wrong with how Vaush has been treated? Or it doesn't have to be Vaush; it could be anyone. Like, what's wrong with how we've handled this? Like, why
And
is
if
it
we can
wrong?
be really clear, it's not just accusations. He literally had it, and food shops is literally like, I yoink it to Yali like regularly. It's not just like an accusation, like they got caught with their hand in the proverbial lolly jar, right?
Well, like I said, I'm not defending food shops at all. But you know what? I'm going to bring it to an example that I think is probably more relevant, and that's, for example, when 𝕾𝖍𝖎 was doing his coverage of the topic, he also accused all of Vaush's fans of being pedophiles. And I think that behavior like that is really irresponsible. You can be a fan of somebody and not agree with their choices or 100% of their choices. We watch people as entertainers. It's not a religion for most people, I would assume. And so my point there is that I think that people are way too quickly to label others with these like extreme insults or these like extreme claims without like any factual basis. Like 𝕾𝖍𝖎 provided no proof that all of Vaush's fans are pedophiles or child molesters or whatever, or that they're all like lolly enjoyers. Like, I'm certainly not. And so when I see people do things like that, I think it creates this issue where everything is like a game, and we use increasingly perhaps effective but unrelated claims to slander people or to just take anger out on people that we don't like. I think that ends up confusing like the wider public or people in this space on what grooming actually looks like, and they don't take accusations seriously because of that. Really, what I would like to see is that these accusations be saved for situations where there is evidence, instead of just throwing it around nonchalantly.
I think really quickly, like the issue with that specifically is like 𝕾𝖍𝖎 said that like defending Vaush's like pedo goon folder is a red flag that you're probably into some weird shit too. That's a fair assumption. Vaush didn't ask anybody to fucking defend him. Everybody threw themselves on top of the fucking pedophilia sword. Like, if you know that somebody has been exposed to have this kind of content and it, like, consume this kind of content, and you're like, oh my god, context, like it's just a drawing, like who fucking cares? Like, obviously you're gonna get called a fucking pedophile. If Fairy Queen gets busted, like, saying crazy shit about black people, and I'm like, whoa, hold on, guys, what was the context of Fairy Queen? They're like, you're just as fucking racist as she is. Like, this is like a no shit situation. Like, this is like a big duh. Like, of course that was gonna happen.
Does Joe or
I
Fairy
don't
Queen want
I don't recall every single person defending that, though. There were people that provided some context to, like, what I think is a very poor analogy of the like the CP to the child, like the child labor thing. Uh
But
but
they
People were
ignored.
defending his goon folder. If they were like, it's not
I'm
actually
sure some
lolly, or
people
like,
were.
oh, it doesn't
Like,
look like a kid, or whatever. If he is into it, like, it's just a drawing. Like, who fucking cares? Like, of course, if those are people in your community that are coming out, like, sweeping for you, if you're
I
defending
wouldn't
something like that, of course you're going to get called a fucking pedo, or at the very least, have some red flags raised about you if you're willing to defend that behavior, right?
I think that, well, there are obviously people that were. I don't think it was anywhere near the majority. I mean, I've seen people be pretty critical of Vaush, including myself.
Well, yeah, but he
Like,
specified that it was the people in Vaush's audience that were defending him probably were into weird shit like he was too.
I don't think he really like specified it that well at all.
I mean, like if you had your ears plugged for most of the stream, I guess, yeah, for sure.
We
I mean,
if anyone
I
in my audience has a
reacted to
clip,
the
hold
whole
on. If
thing,
anyone in my
so
audience has a clip of what he
if you
said,
want
please
to, you
leave
can
it.
go watch it if you don't believe me.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch an 8-hour stream to find the one clip. I'll get right on that.
Joe, go ahead. And then very quick.
Okay, well, as someone who doesn't watch streams for the most part, I think the problem is, yes, that people are too. Here's the thing. Vaush is a hypocrite. That's what makes the whole thing funny. People have pointed out before that he's taken stances which clearly show that he would have probably came down on someone else had they been caught in the same situation, which I think kind of shows the problem with a lot of the streamer culture, that it is this kind of shitty kind of back and forth where people are just looking to kind of play their YouTube Game of Thrones and get on whatever side they think's going to win out in the end. But when it comes to Vaush's folder, I just want to ask a question. Malcolm?
Yes.
That is your name, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you jerk off to pornography?
No. And I also, in the past, back in my degenerate days, I definitely didn't have a fucking folder of it on my computer. That is cringe antisocial behavior. Just fucking straight up.
I think personally, I think a lot of people have a folder with pornography on their computer. I
No, they
think you
don't.
will be a
I would
rare
completely
exception
disagree.
among men. You will
I would
probably.
completely
It
disagree.
depends on the age,
Hold on.
obviously.
One's
I
in
doubt my
chat if you
dad.
have a porn folder. Two's in chat if you don't have a porn folder. I'm team 2. Okay.
Yeah, who the fuck has like a folder of it?
And regardless of whether you think it's normal or not normal, the point is that like when we are looking specifically to identify somebody as a potential child molester, as a potential pedophile, the point is they have a folder full of this material downloaded to their computer, which is what Vaush had. Vaush had a folder full of bestiality pictures of horses raping little girls. It's not funny, Joe. I gotta tell you.
Oh,
I mean, you've been laughing. You think
I
no,
actually
it's not
didn't.
funny.
Hold on,
I'll
let
tell you why
Perry-
it's not.
let Perry
It's
respond.
not funny. Okay, this is not ha 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 funny. Oh, it's so great. Oh, I know it's so great. No, it's not. Okay, for a couple of reasons. Number one, when I said the precedent thing. Okay, if we have one weird person that everybody is willing to defend and allow to continue to exist in the community, we've already had something this happened before. When Mr. Girl was a part of these communities, when he was on streams, when people talked with him, when they debated with him, when they professionally associated with him, they said, oh, he's weird, he's creepy, but also he has the secret insight to the truth of the human mind. And so I'm going to talk to him because I'm going to go see how far the pit really extends. And people were willing to do that. The consequence of that was that tons of people who liked Mr. Girls' content, a lot of those people were creepy, were weird. Purportedly, at least we know at least one of them was a verified sex offender, were brought into these communities. They came into these discords. They came into these spaces. They came and joined and rallied behind him. So it's not just the problem of one person, okay? It's the problem of when we tolerate this one person, when we continue to have this person, all of the other sorts of people who they attract to these communities. And specifically, on the basis of this behavior. So it's not funny. It's not just a hilarious thing. Secondly, right? I wish more people would say this. I'm sorry, this sets a precedent for future people who accuse somebody of sexual harassment or who accuse somebody of being a creep or who of being a weirdo. That when that happens, even if you got a picture, even if you got a clip, even if you have years of clips, years of logs, years of people and other people who can confirm it, if you come forward, if the person has enough subscribers, has enough content, and is popular, charming, well-liked enough, that's, by the way, another sign if somebody is likely to be a child molester or somebody who's likely to be a sex offender. Yes, actually. I'll tell you a story. This is a true story. So this happened at the church that I used to go to back in Omaha, Nebraska. At that church, we had a very well-liked priest, and he was not anything like most people think of when they think of somebody creepy. He was handsome, he was happy, he was charming, and everyone liked him. Everyone thought that he was the greatest guy. He would give high fives, he would go to people's houses. Everyone liked him. And then it turned out that he sexually harassed a young man on a bus multiple times. And there was a huge problem. There was a huge explosion about this in the
Certainly.
community. And even when a therapist walked up to the microphone and said into the microphone, "Hey, just so you know, I'm a licensed counselor and I work with people who are convicted sex offenders. And in my experience, people who are sex offenders are typically not what you think. They're typically well liked. They're typically popular. They're typically people who have great standing in the community. They've just spent years trying to polish their image so that no one will suspect them." Even after she said this, when she sat down, there was another person who then walked up to the microphone, sat in front of the microphone, and said, "Listen, I can't possibly believe that about Father Francis. He was such a wonderful man. He came to my house. He came to dinner. And I know what an evil person like this is because I have been sexually assaulted." And this poor woman started to cry. She
Sure.
was so upset. But I'm almost finished. I promise. This is important. This is the problem that I have, frankly, with a lot of this conversation, okay? I don't deny the importance of talking about our experiences. I think that's important. I think it's a reason why we're impassioned about this topic, particularly around protecting children. But we have to look at what the research says, what the data says. We have to look at what the history says. We can't bank the future safety of our community members, of our friends, on the popularity or how well liked a person is. We have to look at what the objective data
But
states.
very
And
quick,
it
if I may.
shows clearly that this person has a history and a great potential for being sexually abusive.
But
I
very
have a
quick,
question.
I'll get to you in a second, Keldosh, but I want to interrogate
Mhm.
this because I think it's important. At least the impression I got from what you said, and you can correct me if I got the wrong impression, maybe you misspoke, maybe I misheard, what have you, is that being charming, well-liked, etc. is a red flag. That might mean that you're a predator.
No, that's not
It's
what I
quite reasonable.
it's flipped. It's flipped behind that. It's that people who are predators, people who tend to be sexual predators, tend to be charming, tend to be
Well, they're
well liked,
better at it.
tend to look like normal people that you visit and see in everyday society.
Oh, I agree. Actually, I remember
Well,
when I was
hold
about
on,
to
Joe. I wanted to give it to Keldosh next. I'm sorry, we'll get to
Good.
you, but Keldosh needs their space. Go ahead, Keldosh, and thank you for the
I
$2,
just
Tesco Johnson, to say can't have it two ways. Use data or anecdotes. Well, thank you for the $2. Go ahead, Keldosh.
so as a person that has been in Vaush's community for a long time, I really wouldn't agree that he's ever really been that well liked or well celebrated. I mean, this has been
Really?
this has been these accusations have floated around and existed for a long time. Back in 2019, it really inhibited his growth and his popularity with the stuff with Poppy. Now, I have issues with Poppy as an individual that I think are not generally common among people that talk about their experiences of sexual abuse. But besides that, I just want to know, how do you know that he's got all of this stuff on his hard drive based on that folder? I'm not saying that's
I'm saying
unnecessarily a ridiculous thing to suspect, but we don't actually have proof of that. And I also am just curious, why has there been no other instance of him engaging in sexual harassment, verifiable sexual harassment, besides the case
once
with
isn't enough.
Poppy?
True.
Wouldn't
It
it,
needs to be at least
wouldn't
Well,
three.
hold
you
on.
want
Let him
to?
finish. Let him finish, and then you can respond. Go ahead.
Wouldn't you see an established pattern? I'm not saying that it was the right thing to do. I think that it was really dumb. However, this is back in 2018, 2019. People in their early 20s do really stupid shit. I'm not saying that's an excuse. I'm just saying that there are other factors there, like impulse control, for example.
Really stupid things like posting after she doesn't want to have any sexual engagement on the Discord. Poppy knows my deep dish prolapse dicking bloodline technique would leave her screaming like a chimpanzee. Leans on me every time we're in chat together.
It's
You think
horrible.
Also, didn't it come out that he did this to 3 different girls? It wasn't just Poppy. It was more than just one. In the original logs, there were 3 girls that he did this to.
I've yet to see evidence of that.
I can pull up the logs.
Okay,
Well,
but respond if you would, Keldosh, to the accusation, for lack of a better term.
Well, when I say like evidence, like logs in the same degree as Poppy's, like
Yeah, in the video where he goes over, like Destiny goes over all of it in a video, and there were like 3 girls that he brings up that he had issues with. The other one was a girl that was like, his defense was like, oh well, she was religiously sheltered and like scared of her sexuality, but if I asked her enough to send me pictures of her tits, she would feel better about herself. That was pretty much it. You can watch the video is like 45 minutes long, and he goes over all of it.
well, and I guess my thing with this is, well, I agree that all that stuff was terrible and that he shouldn't have done it. I would think, though, that there would be more of a pattern here, or that he would attempt to engage with fans inappropriately. Like, for example, you bring up Mr. Girl. I don't think his content is comparable to Mr. Girl's content at all. Like,
You don't think that just like maybe he just got fucking caught and nuked for it, and then he stopped messaging girls on Discord like that, but maybe he transitioned to like a different platform or a different area where he does the same fucking thing, like that he learned his lesson and he didn't do it in Discords anymore, and especially not other people's Discords?
I mean, there's no way for us to know for sure. Like, we're just speculating here, right? At the same time, though, I think that there's enough people that are very much like out to get Vaush booted from this space, and I think that it wouldn't exactly be difficult for them to find other people trying to speak out. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not saying that, that's not a possibility. However, I would think that over these past, I don't know, it's been what, like 5 years? We'd see more than this.
How many do you think, if it were true, just out of curiosity, what would be the number of times? It's more than 3, apparently. 1 a year, 1 a month, 1 every
I don't
week?
want to give it an exact number. I would just want to see a pattern that would extend longer than just one giant drama incident, basically. And I think that
One giant drama incident. Dude, the man harassed this woman for years. This is not one giant drama incident.
Well, and also if people are just like out to get him and out to cancel him, like, is it not possible that the things that he's doing are worth like canceling? Like, if there is like a big righteous crusade to like fucking deplatform Vaush, like, does that just exonerate him from everything bad that he does? Like, oh, it's fine that he had like Lolly in his folder. People are just after him.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that he's not like the comparison, for example, that Farrah used like with the pastor. Like, he's not in the same position as like a pastor or somebody that would be widely.
Okay, no, that's not true.
Let 𝕬𝖏𝐻 stop. You gotta let 𝕬𝐻 finish, and then you can respond to him. I promise.
Somebody that would widely be considered like a safe person, or like somebody that is, a community leader in the sense of a community leader for for all ages, right? Like, I don't, Vaush doesn't advertise himself. Does it matter? I mean, I would say that it does. Like, if you are harassing people and you also advertise yourself for all ages, that's going to attract an audience that contains children. If you don't, encourage minors to be in your audience, and if you create content that's primarily aimed at adults and you're not creating content for kids, then
does that really matter if you're an abusive person or not, if you do it in the presence of children or not, depending if they're in your audience?
I would say that it would be, I think that in order to make the claim that he's specifically like predating children, then yeah, that does matter.
Not even in the sense of predating children, just that he has like sussy-wussy shit on his computer, or that he's sexually harassed women in the past. Like, because he doesn't have children in his audience, it's just whatever.
I'm not saying it's just whatever. I'm saying that I would expect to see that if he was predating on children.
After he already got caught harassing a girl in a Discord server that wasn't his, he would be stupid enough to cultivate an audience of children and predate on them after he already got busted for predating.
There are other YouTubers that have done that and have, essentially been gotten away with it. Look at like 𝕾𝖏𝖎𝖙, look at Shane Dawson.
But he didn't get away with it. He got caught. So why would he do it again?
Well, they have been caught at various times as well.
And they don't do it on the same platforms anymore. Onision has been nuked into the sun. He doesn't have access to any of the platforms where he could groom people. And I'm not
Well,
even saying that Vaush
how
is like a
long?
groomer, evil pedophile. I'm challenging this question where you're like, oh, well, he doesn't have kids in his audience. He's not grooming the kids. So who gives a fuck if he whacks it to Lolly? Like, who gives a fuck if he sexually abused women? He doesn't have children in his audience. Like, why does that matter? Like, can we still not criticize these behaviors, even if children aren't exposed to them, which we all know that they are?
I,
Like,
I
all
don't.
there is one button where it says, are you 18 before you view this channel? And you just hit yes. You don't need to upload an ID.
I
Like, of
want
course there are kids that
you.
wander into that content.
I want you to point out where I said you couldn't criticize him because I've said that I've criticized him for it.
You
So
just brought up
I'm
the idea
curious.
that because
Hold
there
on,
aren't kids in the
you
audience,
gotta
it
let
isn't a big
Keldos
deal.
finish, though. Okay, so finish your point, but then
The
Fairy Queen
thing
was
is, though,
responding.
is that I'm specifically talking about him being a genuine risk to children. I'm not talking about. I'm not using
We're
that
not
in any
saying
other
we're not
context.
no. We're not talking about him being a risk. Okay, fair enough. There might not be children in his audience. He's still a risk to his audience. He's still a risk to these communities. He's still a risk to other people who are here,
Yeah, if
regardless of
he's
whether or not they're
normalizing
children
that
or not.
consuming lolicon is fine. Like, even if it is in
Mhm.
an audience of adults, and you're like, no, guys, actually, like, bestiality porn and lolicon and like CP is fucking base. Like, that is obviously harmful to the people that are being like told that consuming this kind of material is okay.
$2 from Cryborn to say Keldoge in a cult right now. Thank you for the $2.
I'm gonna call it right now.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
But I wanted to pass the mic to Fairy Queen a little bit, and I want to ask you specifically, Fairy Queen. You
Okay.
say he's a risk. Can you elaborate? And risk in what way? Like when we talked, right? When you came on my stream with me and Brianna Wu, you said that I needed to content roll him because him having
Mhm.
access to my Discord presented a danger to my community. And I would just like you to elaborate on what that means.
So the danger is that
I just wanted to say something quick to the
Please.
person that said that. I would love you to find a cult where you can, have screaming matches with the cult leader and not get kicked out.
okay. Thanks for that. Anyway, so as far as like content rolling him, that has okay. I understand. It's about limiting, first of all, limiting access for him having access to the rest of the community. Now, you said while we were talking about this that he's never left a message. He's never called in. I've only had him on a show maybe once or twice. I don't know how many times you've had him on. So really, like, what's the danger of he's not really in the community. He's just kind of in the Discord, right? And fair enough, right? But the problem is that when you don't content roll him, right? It's about setting a precedent for when somebody does this kind of behavior that we have a response to it, that there is a consequence to it. And it sends a message to anyone else who wants to follow Vaush, who is caught having this type of material on their computer, normalizing this for other people, or who has a history of sexual harassment, that regardless of how many followers that person has, how much money that person has, that person is not going to have access. And we don't care we don't care who you're associated with. We don't care how popular we are. This is what
I
happens
understand.
to you. It's about setting a
But
precedent for everyone
that's
else.
different than them being a danger. That's setting a
He's a
example.
potential danger, but what I'm saying is like the how dangerous he is isn't really the point. It's about setting a precedent for
Why
when
is
we
it not
see
the point?
somebody who has a history of risky behavior, and this is how we are going to respond to it, unless we have any other justifiable reason to believe otherwise.
But
That's the point.
but the reason,
I think that you could
however,
argue really clearly, though, that.
if I
Go
may,
ahead.
because I pushed on Keldosh, and I want to push on you on this, right?
Okay.
I'm trying to be equal here as much as I can. The reason that someone's a risk and the risk of doing nothing, as you've argued and laid out, is at least hangs on the premise that if we do nothing, they will cause harm, that they will be in actual danger. So the question of what danger does having him in my Discord pose isn't something we can just hand wave away. You'd need to kind of explain to me what that danger is. Otherwise, if there is no danger, then why would I take any action?
So I think that what Malcolm said earlier, which is that it's likely that Vaush, if he is continuing this behavior, it's probably on a separate platform because he's probably not stupid enough to nuke his career like in these public servers, is probably true. But if there's a danger, the danger is that he could potentially target members in the community. He could potentially target women in the community. He might not actually ever like join a VC, but he could message people who are in the site. He could see who is a part of the community. He could try to message them. That's a potential danger. There's a risk of him being able simply to have access to our conversations in these logs anyway. and being able to use them in order to help to justify his own arguments. Now, the point of whether or not it's likely or not isn't what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you need to have a precedent for how we treat people who have this history, and it needs to be consistent. It can't just be, it has to be based off of behavior. It can't be based off of professional relationships or popularity or subscriber counts. It has to be based.
Okay.
Vaush needs to be treated the same, even worse probably, in comparison to food shops, or as an example. I know that we didn't want to bring up food shops, but I just bring her up as an example.
Food Shops is very proud. Well, I shouldn't say proud, but she like openly talks about being a pedophile, though. I don't think that's the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing, because you wanna know why? Because Vaush apparently has been hiding it and lies about it. That's the difference, okay? The difference is that Food Shops has no filter, will tell you almost every single thing that is on her mind, whereas Vaush has years and years of history saying that it's justifiable to lie or to twist evidence in order to be rhetorically persuasive, in order to achieve your political ends. He has a track record history of saying these things. I don't know why anybody would believe much of anything that he has to say. It's part of the reason why I'm kind of frustrated about this conversation about him apologizing. What on earth would that accomplish? What do you think that's going to do? Do you think he's going to go to his folder and drag it and toss it in the trash right after he says sorry? That's not going to happen. He's going to keep on doing this, and he's going to hide it and try to be way more secretive about it after this. That's what I think is going to happen.
Well, is it based on behavior or because he's a bigger content creator? I don't think you can have it both ways.
It is based off of behavior, and what I'm saying is his status as a content creator should not have any impact on the way that we treat somebody who behaves this way.
Well, and again, something that is important as well in the context of this is like the normalization of it, like to his audience. Like I would say pretty easily post Fortress arc, like you can clearly see that like there are a lot of people that genuinely are confused about like what the issue is about having a massive goon folder about like horse rape and shit like that. Like it normalizes the consumption of this kind of material to people that are insulated in your audience to the point where if somebody outside is like, dude, you're yoinking it to like, a drawn picture of like a kid, like what the fuck is wrong with you? And they're like, well, what do you mean? It's just drawn. It doesn't mean anything. Like who cares? Like the harm also presents itself in normalizing this to people that otherwise like wouldn't behave this way.
Mhm.
So do
I
you think?
want
Oh,
No,
you
let's
go,
give
go, no,
Doge.
go
No,
ahead, go ahead.
I want no. Hold on. I want to give you a chance to respond to that, Doge. I want to, and Joe, if Joe has a response, I don't know if he does. But,
I've mostly just been bored because you keep shouting about this Vaush guy, and I was hoping it would go
Okay, do
somewhere
you
else
wanna
besides just Vaush.
sure.
Well, you did say lolly panel. I thought that would be
Okay,
more of a
what do you
focus,
want to
not
say
so
in
much
defense of
Vaush.
Lolly in general? Go ahead.
Well, what I wanted to bring up first of all is well, actually, I can go through quite a few things, but it's a complicated area because there's a lot of whataboutisms. But to start off with, when I bring up pornography, I just want to point out how massive the market for girls who look like they could be 14 is. It's huge. The porn industry itself, even in the States, there is stuff like I assume, I don't know if you're familiar with like facial abuse and sites like that. They are literally, I would call it paid rape to a degree, because what they are doing is they're getting models who maybe do
So
like
you
a
think
single.
that's bad, to be clear? You think that's a negative?
Yes.
Okay, so why
But
don't you think Lolly is a negative?
I think the thing is, what I'm getting to here is you also have these rape fantasy videos, right? And they are basically an acted out thing. You can say it's gross when you see a professional porn star like choked to death by a guy fucking her, but if it's basically a professional doing an act, I think it comes under a weird freedom of speech thing where I'm like, okay, I don't know where we go with this. But when you compare it to something like what D&E Media does, where they're basically paying an actress who will do like one shoot at like, say, I don't know, a couple of thousand, and you're seeing this actress literally crying, some guy pisses on her. I feel like that's the clear difference.
Okay, I'm
there.
struggling here, buddy, because I'm
And
curious how this relates to like you're
I
defending
think
Lolly. Can you square this circle for me concisely?
Okay, my point is, we have this thing where obviously there's a huge market for a lot of weird shit, including girls who could easily be mistaken for way younger than they are, which is where we get into the whole lolly mess. Because one of the things I noticed when people were talking about Vaush, which I did pay attention to, was people were looking up fictional characters' ages. And I'm sorry, that's goofy. Either it looks like a child or it doesn't, which is where it gets all weird, because you have these people trying to argue about the ages of fictional characters, at which point you either know it's like, okay, that looks like a fucking gnome, that's gross, or you go, oh, it looks like a big titted tall woman. It's quite easy to tell just by looking. And yeah, and also another thing is we get into the whole art mess a lot with Lolly, which is why we have people like Alan Moore, the guy who did Watchmen, arguably producing Lolicon, which, yeah, that exists. You can find it if you want. I don't. It's not particularly worth paying attention to, but it does get into the mess of, okay, what's artistic, what's not. That's why I also brought up 𝕵𝖎𝖎 as an example, something that's absolutely beloved, which I've quite heavily criticised for its sexual content. But I would say, yes, it deserves its freedom of speech.
Can I respond to that? So
Yep.
I've heard this topic brought up a lot, and I think that this is going to take a hot minute. But to properly answer you, we need to go over like the history of child pornography laws like within the United States. Okay. And
Mhm.
just to be very, very clear about like how it regards to freedom of speech. So the first thing that you need to know, and this is true for anyone watching, okay, when we're talking about freedom of speech, there are always exceptions to freedom of speech. Those exceptions are incitement to violence, fighting words, obscenity, blackmail, libel, defamation, and child pornography. These are all things that are considered to be exceptions of freedom of speech. And the Supreme Court made a decision regarding the reason why child pornography is federally illegal is because of a decision that was made in 1982, New York versus Ferber, which unanimously ruled that the First Amendment of the United States like did not forbid states from banning the sale of depicting of children engaged in sexual activity, even if the material was not obscene. Now, this part is a technical point, but it's important to understand, okay? Child pornography is not considered to be obscenity, okay? It's a separate category. Anything that could be considered to be child pornography is automatically banned. It is automatically not covered under the freedom of speech law. And part of the reason for that is because, according to what in the court's opinion, when they made this decision in 1982, and this is important regarding to obscenity, visual depictions of children engaged in sexual activity have negligible artistic value. That's important because when we're considering the Miller test, which is what establishes what is obscenity and what is not obscenity, it's anything that could be that is obscene or that is offensive, but there is artistic value to it. Therefore, like you could still allow it to happen. So this happened in 1982. Then there was another decision that was made in 2002, which was Ashcroft versus the Free Speech Coalition, where they decided, and what they decided was simulated. So this regards to Lolly specifically, that simulated child pornography, that drawn pictures, that mere possession of this in your home did not count as child pornography, and it was considered to be protected free speech. And this is the reason why people say that lolly and drawn child pornography is legal, but that's not true. And the reason why it's not true is because of a decision that was made in 2008. So you guys can look this up. This is the United Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. This was the United States of America versus 𝕻𝖎 Worley. This was the defendant. The story of this was Dwight Worley was convicted of knowingly receiving on a computer 20 obscene Japanese anime cartoons depicting minors engaged in sexually explicit content in violation of, this is the law, knowingly receiving as a person previously convicted of receiving depictions of minors engaged in sexually explicit content. So this is why that Supreme Court decision is important. So this is what they specifically said in the decision and made reference to the previous decision in 2002. The decision that they made here was that you have the right to possess, but you don't have the right to receive. So what that means is if you go, Joe Brooks, you pick out your notepad and pen, and if you want to draw a disgusting image in the privacy of your own home, the sad truth of it is if the FBI breaks in and finds that in your apartment, they can't convict you of it. But
I'm
what they
not in
can,
America. We
but
have
what
completely different
but
laws
what they
here.
could convict you of if you were a based United States American citizen, if you were here, if you are on your computer and if you're downloading images, if you are buying manga books that has this depiction, that, and if you are going onto the internet, which is by far the vast majority of people who consume lolly, then you absolutely can be
So
convicted
to
for
be
that.
clear,
Okay,
And
just
you
here's
if I
the
can
may,
go for it.
before you
just
can respond to
if
that, just so I'm clear, Fairy Queen, is your argument that lolly is child pornography?
So in what as I think Malcolm and it is child pornography. Legally speaking, it is not considered to be child pornography because it does not
But you
actually
consider
depict
it.
a child. But I
You
consider but I'm
consider
just
it.
saying for the
Okay.
sake of the legality of the
Sure.
argument, however, child erotica, if you go online and if you download it to your computer, if you buy it from the store, you can still be sent to jail. You can still be convicted and you can still go to jail for it. That's what I'm
okay,
saying. What I'm saying is
here's
if you're at home and if you're drawing a weird picture, you can't be arrested for that. That's what it means.
so here's the problem. Why can Waterstones or something sell something which might easily be considered child pornography?
I
Why
don't know
can
what
one of
that
the
is. I
biggest
can't
chain?
respond.
It's the biggest chain of bookstores in the UK, and we have much stricter laws.
You're not in
I'd
the United
imagine.
States, so I can't answer that. All I can tell
Yeah,
you
my
is that, like,
point
if
is that the United States would probably be very similar. Because this isn't just a Japanese thing, for the record. This is basically very. If you look into the sort of people who actually do draw, it is, like I said, Alan Moore. That's probably one of the most well-known comic writers in the world, I would guess, next to maybe Stan Lee. I don't know. I'm not huge on comics, to be honest. But, he has put out a work which is undeniably a thing of very eroticized, like, children stuff. He did it with his wife. I don't know. The guy's into some weird shit. I've never really been a huge fan, but it's interesting
So
that
I
that
don't know.
exists.
So I don't know because I've never seen this. I don't have access to it. And I don't want to look it up. But my assumption would be that when we're talking specifically about child erotica, we are talking specifically about drawn explicit images of children engaged in sexual activity or who are depicted in a sexualized manner. So if it's the case that, like, you're legally able to sell this material, that means that it doesn't cross the subjective line across for it to be for it to be considered child erotica. That's what I would assume to be the reason. Now, to answer this, but there's a second possibility, and the second possibility is that nobody thinks to sue over this. Nobody thinks to sue the bookstores over this. Nobody thinks to file a lawsuit over this, precisely before the reason that you mentioned earlier, which is the common misconception, which is that lolly is legal and that this is a matter of freedom of speech. Clearly speaking, when we're looking at, like, the track record, according to these Supreme Court decisions, it's only legal in the sense that you can sit with a notepad and paper and draw it. It's
Is it your
not legal in the
contention,
sense that you
Fairy Queen, is it your contention that based on the contents of Vaush's folder, that he is in legal trouble here?
I think that he potentially could be. I think that it's very possible that he could be. If he went onto a website and he downloaded these materials, this is exactly like the Dwight Worley case, like in 2008. It's no different than here. And by the way, this is true for any person. Like, if your boss goes to your computer and they see that you have sent emails containing this type of material, if they see tons of downloaded images like these on that person's computer, that person can go to jail and that person can be convicted.
I will say someone I know at a job I had did actually do that. Not that they actually went to jail or anything, they just accidentally shared their hentai folder. So it does have. Vaush isn't the only one I've seen that happen to.
$5
But
from
no.
Frauborn to say ban pornography, embrace Jesus Christ. Thank you for the $5. I wanted to
Good
toss
luck
it
with that.
we'll go to 𝕾𝖍𝖎 and
No,
we'll go to
I don't know.
Malcolm.
I look at those ultra religious countries and I look at and I'm like, I don't think that's gonna work.
I get it, Joe. We're gonna toss it to 𝕾𝖍𝖎 and then we're gonna toss it to Malcolm. Go ahead.
So, I personally find the criminalization of, now that doesn't necessarily mean that I think this type of stuff should be completely unregulated. I think that there's a lot of effective means that you could implement on the distribution side to mitigate a lot of harm here. But like in Canada, for example, like lolly is pretty explicitly illegal. And I'm thinking of a couple cases where, the material in question was ambiguous enough, although it wasn't lolly, for those people to be charged. For example, people have been charged for having just yaoi, which is just gay anime pornography, basically. And then you've had another individual case that I've heard of where, a man was put in prison for 3 years for having 80 lolicon pictures on his computer, but there was no evidence that he had ever predated on a child or that he was looking at, like, IRL child pornography. So I think that when you're looking at those cases, I mean, I don't see how useful that is in terms of the law. Like, are we really targeting the right people with that? And also, I want to just make the interesting point that, you know, we treat like lolicon in this special category when there's all kinds of really problematic and predatory pornography out there. For example, like incest pornography is very popular. You know, do we need to like, you know, warn people's like sisters that look at incest pornography that they might, you know, that their sibling is gonna like, you know, predate upon them, or like consensual non-consent, for example. Like, is that not like a glorified depiction of predatory behavior? So I'm curious as to why like lolicon is its own special category in that sense, because well, I do agree that it's problematic and can be harmful. I don't think that it's anywhere near the same thing as like IRL child pornography.
Okay, Joe, put your hand down. We'll get to you. You were too excited when you raised your hand when they talked about incest pornography. Way too excited. Calm down. Just to answer your question though, real quick, it's because it's kids. That's the reason. But Malcolm, go ahead.
Well, I mean, are not like are kids like somehow more
Vulnerable? Yes.
serious than like a woman getting raped? I would think that they're on
yes,
an equal
Yes.
level.
Absolutely.
I
Like,
think
if children are
uncom-
like the target of your sexual interest, that is especially
let's
heinous.
be clear.
Joe,
Statistically,
Right.
we're
there are
giving it to
far more
Malcolm.
rapists
Joe,
than there
okay,
are
Joe,
pedophiles.
stop. We're giving it to Malcolm.
It's
Malcolm has
just
the
a
floor.
fact.
Joe, can you not? We're giving it to Malcolm. Malcolm has the floor. Malcolm, go ahead.
So, like, again, like reiterating this point, like over and over and over again, the problematic aspect of lolicon is that you are indulging in a sexual, like, essentially a paraphilia, that your sexual interest is a child. And your consumption of that indicates that this is something that you are sexually aroused by. And if that is a predilection that you are into, that is a red flag for every single child that you will ever be around. I don't need to see data to see that, like, oh, well, 90% of the time, if somebody who consumes lolly doesn't rape a kid, so therefore lolly's fine. I genuinely don't care about that, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. If somebody tells me I think kids are hot, I don't give a fuck if they're going to be a non-offending pedophile for the rest of their life. They should never have the opportunity to offend. They should be kept away from children forever, period. That's like kind of the whole point of people coming out with this kind of information is like, okay, you have denoted that you think kids are hot. Okay, what is our response to that? Not let's do semantic fucking run around bibble babble about if it's hebophilia, if it's drawn, if it's a picture, if the kid's like kind of hot, if the kid has big tits. Like, no, we would never tolerate like this kind of discussion around somebody explicitly declaring their interest in a certain demographic of somebody who cannot consent, mind you, in any meaningful capacity. And at the very end of the line, it is our responsibility, especially in a space like this, where we need to push back against people thinking that this is normal. We need to make sure that we are condemning people that consume this material, regardless or not if they offend. The whole problem is that they think kids are hot. Like, I don't know how to explain it more clearly. The issue is that somebody thinks that children are hot. That is an issue, okay? And the whole argument about like incest porn and like all this other shit, like, I'm not going to defend the existence of incest porn or like consent, non-consent. I don't fuck with any of that shit. However, I will say there is a very, very, very clear difference between two adults pretending to be brother and sister getting paid to fuck on camera versus somebody like actually like having sexual interest in having sex with a child or consuming drawn depictions of a child being raped. These are completely separate things. And I mean, if you cannot parse those two things, I don't know what to say to you other than like you should probably be on the list too. That's all I could say.
Oh,
I- and I-
you're thinking
and I'll-
that they're both bad?
I'm going to hop back off of what Malcolm said because everything that he said is absolutely right. But on top of that, specifically with Lolly, remember I mentioned this earlier, like when we were discussing like one of the unique problems, which is unique to child pornography specifically. All of the types of pornography that you mentioned, incest pornography, CNC, these are clearly these are problematic and like these are problematic examples of pornography. But however, like there is something specific about child pornography that makes it particularly dangerous, and this is why it's dangerous. So These are the 4 things. So this was published like shortly after the Supreme Court decision in 2002. It was published by the FBI, the Criminal Investigative Unit Division, Crimes Against Children Unit in 2002. These are the 4 things that child molesters use child pornography to do: to demonstrate sex acts to kids, to lower the sexual inhibitions of children, to desensitize children to sex, and to sexually arouse children. That is something that is specific to child pornography, and that is just as much true as it is about lolicon as it is about real depictions of children. And so when you say, what's the big deal? Like, look at all of the different problematic. I agree with you. All of this is bad, right? But it's far less likely for an adult person to take a CNC video, to show it to another adult person, and to coerce and to push that person into being raped or to being sexually assaulted. That is far more likely to happen to somebody who's a child. And on top of that, when children are exposed to this type of material, which anyone who consumes this on the internet is incentivizing by clicking on it, by adding it to the algorithm, it means that those children are far more likely to be sexually violent and to sexually aggress on other children around them. We are not just concerned. The problem with lolicon specifically is not just that a creepy adult will find it and will use it to try to molest children, or will use it to try to gratify his or her own impulses. The problem with it is that a child may find this on the internet because they're looking to play a Kim Possible video game, and they click on something that they don't understand, and they see a depiction of a sexualized cartoon depiction of somebody who looks like them being sexually dominated or abused by someone else, and then they will go out and then they will sexually abuse another child out in the world. That is what is uniquely bad about the lolicon, and that is not something that you can say even in the same degree to compare to any other type of pornography that you've mentioned.
And I would like to clarify really quickly, just to throw in one more thing, is even if I agree that there might not be a connection between the consumption of lolicon and actually predating on children, that window is significant enough for me where protecting children is going to be the priority, period. Like, you can find other shit to yoink to. You can draw your fucking short stack goblin girlfriends or whatever the fuck. Because that window exists, whether or not it's a strong correlative or like a light correlative, it doesn't matter. The protection of children is the priority, and that comes before your goon stash every single time, every fucking scenario possible under the sun.
Responses?
Yep, sure. Okay, first of all, the Kim Possible thing was kind of what I was getting at when I brought out the sheer amount of people jerking off to My Little Pony characters, which is insane and generally quite fascinating. Which is, if they're looking for Kim Possible, they're probably seeing pornography of Kim Possible. That's probably part of why there's this insane base, the whole furry thing with Sonic the Hedgehog and stuff like that. It's kids who watch Disney movies and stuff like that. They start looking them up, and that ends up being their early exposure to like extreme sexual content, which is why we get these weird situations where people have fetishes for, like, I don't know, Baloo or Tigger or whatever the fuck. But yeah, that's not really short stack. What I find interesting is, Malcolm, at a point you started going off about children, and you defined a child as someone who could be tall, big titted, and Joe, you go, well, then if you, rather than that, why don't you just make your short stack? And I'm like, wait, isn't the short stack more like the child than having this vague definition of what even is a child? Like, if you
Not
basically argue,
necessarily.
yeah, if you argue that a drawing can basically look like fucking Jessica Rabbit, then I'm sorry, you're jerking off to like Jessica Rabbit.
Well,
It
your height
doesn't
doesn't
matter.
determine your age, but if I showed you a picture of a 12-year-old girl that went through puberty at 12 years old and she had like triple Ds, would you think that that's okay to like whack off to because of the secondary
No,
sex characteristics, or do you think that
because
there's a
that's a
little more than
12-year-old
just appearance?
girl.
Yeah,
That's a
there's a little bit
12-year-old
more
girl.
there than just appearance, right? There's a little bit more than that. Yeah, that's kind of my point.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's a real 12-year-old girl, so you probably shouldn't be sharing her
I mean,
image
even if I
around.
showed you a drawn picture of a 12-year-old girl getting fucking raped and it was an anime, and I was like, oh, but look, she has big tits, does that get away from the fact that this is a drawn depiction of a 12-year-old getting raped? No, the
No,
secondary
because
sex
that's not
characteristics, the
a
height is not the
depiction
only
of
factor,
a
right?
12-year-old. You can basically, that's my point. You can basically take any picture and then attach an age to it, which makes it weird if someone is really looking for, like, I want I want something where there's a bit of text which says they're 12, but they look like fucking, I don't know, Marilyn Monroe, whoever people think is hot. But that's my point. It's like the short stack stuff I find way more creepy, just because I'm like, God, that looks like a kid. That's gross.
It's all pretty
But
fucking disgusting. I
but
mean, you
if
can
I
use
see a
whatever you want.
short stack and it
in
says
love.
that's why we get the weird mess with anime fandom where they argue all about age. Why we have this meme about like the 1,000-year-old 𝕶𝖓 or something, and it's like that looks like a kid in a bikini. But of course, Nintendo publish it, which is part of my point. Also, is we bring this stuff up a lot about the idea of like weirdos, but can I just point out that like you can have a major company like Nintendo which puts out like an anime style like strategy game like Fire Emblem, and some of the characters in that are like obviously very sexually designed but look like they're fucking kids. And it's really weird when you consider it's a company like fucking Nintendo, which is part of why I do at least have a bit of sympathy for the lolicons, because those guys, the dealer is like Nintendo, a fucking family company. You can't just produce really sexualized images of characters that look like kids
Well,
and
it's really
then
weird that
like
so many people
completely
play
cut
that
the
game, but they
company
don't
out.
jerk off to it. Like, is that not weird that like so many people are able to consume and enjoy and play this game where there like might be a depiction of a younger person in like a bikini or something, but they don't like jack off to it?
Well, I
Do you
think
not think
what's
that that might be
weird
the issue with it?
I think the weird thing is these characters are clearly drawn in a very sexualized manner, which makes me question why not go after the company also? Because a lot
Well,
of the time, it's why we get this weird thing like, the whole Gamergate mess with people complaining about censored Japanese games. And I'm like, you can laugh at the people who complain about it, but don't buy the fucking game at all. If you really hate this stuff, don't support companies which put it out.
Do you think there's a difference between like a sexualized kind of image of a younger person in a video game versus like a drawn depiction of like a literal child getting raped, like a graphic depiction of it? Are those two things the same?
Well, I think if you're clearly, that's the thing, you're saying sexualized depiction of a
Yeah, so
child,
think of like
which
a drawing of like Misty from Pokemon, and she has on like her crop top and like her shorts or whatever, and she's like 14.
I
And I think
think,
she's pretty big busted for like how old they depict her. If you take just that character existing in a video game that
I
might be like a
think,
little risque in its
I think
presentation,
the
is
thing
that the
is,
same as a drawn depiction of a child getting
Misty
raped?
is a very mild example. I would be thinking more some of the Fire Emblem character designs.
You can pick whatever
Persona's
character you
another
want. If you want
example.
to pick like a sexualized minor or whatever that's drawn to be like risque or sexual, is that the same to you as a drawn depiction of a child getting raped, like a graphic depiction of a child getting raped?
Well, I would actually
I'm
argue
never
a
getting
graphic
monetized
depiction
for
of a
this level of
child
discourse.
being raped
You need
actually
we're not going
much
to answer
like
the question because you know the answer is yes. There's a big difference between like, oh, here's a video game character that comes from Japan where they have kind of a different like taboo around the way that children dress versus like a literal drawn like fucking BBC orgy where they're raping a kid. Like obviously these things are fucking different. I don't know why that's hard to say.
No, I think they are different, but the
And to
point
Okay,
be
I'm
but
clear,
making
just to
is one
ground
is
it,
clear, they're both clearly very sexualized in design.
one
And
of them is
yeah,
intended to be pornography and consumed for pornographic reasons. The other is just
you
a
know
cultural representation of a character.
you know how many people in the like anime industry draw stuff also linked into pornography, right? Like it's not, the connection is pretty strong. If you
If you're
look,
fucking sick in the head, yeah, if I'm just playing Pokemon on my
no,
fucking phone playing
I'm
Pokemon Go,
sorry,
and I'm
it
not
is
like, dude, I can't wait to see Misty's
hold on.
animated
I'm
tits. Like, what are
sorry,
you
no,
talking
a
about?
lot of the
we are
artists they
not. Hold
hire
on.
also
Stop.
have
Hold
I just
on.
want to.
Hold on.
Sorry.
We're not going to argue about Misty from Pokemon and how big her tits may or may not be. I don't know. I don't care. This is almost beside the point. I wanted to give it to 𝕾𝖍𝖎 to maybe rescue this line of questioning, but I do have a question to maybe ground us, because to Malcolm's point, right? To Malcolm's point, what Vaush had in his folder weren't just sexualized images. They were images of, in some cases, childlike figures performing sex acts, I believe, on animals.
On a horse. On a horse.
Yeah.
yes, a horse.
Okay. Well,
To be exact, it was a
but
horse
I want to
ejaculating
pass
into
it
a
to
bucket.
𝕾𝖍𝖎.
Okay,
And,
stop it.
yeah.
Stop it. Jesus Christ.
I'm curious why, like, Malcolm, you can see the difference between like a mildly like sexualized image of like a cartoon child and lolicon, but not the difference between like the actual extreme real life harm that happens in IRL CP and lolicon, and say that they're equally harmful. or
No
at
one
least
here is
imply.
saying that no one here is saying that IRL CP is less harmful or at the same level as lolly. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying
No.
But
is
you want it to be legislated as such, no?
Yes, I want every single person that consumes lolicon for sexual gratification to be on a list so they can never work at a fucking daycare or watch somebody's kid. Yeah, I want those people to be kept away from children. Yes.
I'm talking specifically about the legislation of making lolicon illegal, though.
it's
Lolicon's
it,
already federally illegal, so there's not much I can do about that. If they choose not to prosecute, they choose not to prosecute. However, I do think a lolly list would be quite fucking banger. So if I go to apply it at like a fucking daycare and it pings that I have a goon folder full of fucking lolicon, they won't hire me because I shouldn't be allowed around kids if that's the kind of shit that I'm into.
The other thing too, though, is like if somebody is watching any kind of violent pornography, would you want them in any like type of position where they're working with vulnerable people? Why single out lolicon here?
Well,
because
because that's the
according
topic of the debate. But if somebody was into like, I'm thinking like crazy shit, like think like Serbian film. If it came out that somebody actually fucking got off of that shit, yeah, absolutely. Or if you're somebody that is like a necrophile, should you have a job at a mortuary? Probably not. Like, yes, I definitely think that if it comes to light that these are predilections that you have based on your sexual interests, yeah, there are certain demographics that you should probably be kept away from. Yeah.
Fairy Queen, you were trying to get in there. I want to give you the space.
again, the reason so I agree with everything that Malcolm just said, but also sidebar, okay? Because according to the report that we have from the FBI, people who are child molesters or people who are sexually attracted to kids tend to collect not just actual IRL child pornography, but also child erotica. And the reason why that is because actual CP can be difficult to find. It can be difficult to find true actual images of child pornography for many people. So it used to be, so for that reason, what a lot of people will do is not a lot of people, a lot people who specifically are attracted to children, they will find as many images as they possibly can and they will store them so that they can find them later. That's the reason why that's why they download them to their computer in the first place. It's so that they don't have to go back to the website over and over and over again.
Can I ask a question just really quick for everybody? Does everybody here understand that like the sexual abuse of children is like especially bad because of the vulnerability of children and their inability to consent? Does everybody agree that that's a special kind of sex crime?
I mean, I'm a
I think
victim of
that's a fairly
CSA, so
obvious
yeah.
thing.
Okay, just checking because we keep kind of leaning on this thing where it's like, well, what about like rape porn? Well, what about this kind of porn? It's like if we're talking about the sexual like target of your affection being children, that is especially bad when we're talking about it in the context of children, right? It does get that special little moniker because it is something that is a little bit more serious and more severe, right? And I shouldn't say a little bit,
Okay.
significantly more serious and severe.
Okay. So, has anyone done any research on AI pornography? Okay, I
Go
guess
for
I'm
it.
the only one who's done any research on it. Because
So,
that is, first of all,
just real quick, Joe, to maybe shortcut this, are you speaking of AI generated images of children?
not particularly, but
Okay,
it
then
will
why does
end up
this matter?
leaning there because that's an inevitable thing to bring up.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm just trying to why does this matter? And I did get $5.
What
Hold on,
matters is
$5 from
what the
Parallax.
AI thinks people want,
Okay,
basically.
we'll get into that in a second. Let me read this dono. $5 from Parallax. Notably, people in cults rarely recognize they're in a cult. 𝕾𝖍𝖎 definitely giving off cult vibes. Don't drink the lolly aid. Thank you for the $5. Joe, back to you.
Okay. So basically, AI, first of all, it absolutely loves Asian women. Like 9 to 1, it is into Asian women. Next of all, it hates pubic hair. Like it's basically just looking at what the audience seems to respond to. It's a bit like did anyone hear about the YouTube Kids thing where there was an AI which was just
what does this have to do with the lolly discussion?
what it has to do with is the uncomfortable fact that there's a huge amount of guys who are really into young looking Asian women with no pubic hair.
Do you think that's the same as lolly?
I think it points to an uncomfortable fact that there's a general strong interest in young looking women in just regular pornography. And when you feed that into AI, where we get into the lolly thing, we can remove the age of consent because we don't have to worry about a cartoon character's age anymore because it's an AI. But what we're going to see is I think some of Vaush's images were AI driven, but what we're going to see is some very uncomfortable revelations regarding what people are into when an AI is basically making the judgments rather than anything else. And it's going to be very interesting.
Can I respond? Also, I'll respond quickly to Joe, and then I want to respond to something that I saw in chat because I think this is important. So, Joe, I mean, sure, but my answer to you is that like the AI generated image, it would be treated exactly the same way as the Supreme Court case in 2008 treated the man that had tons of downloaded images. Okay, it's illegal. It's illegal to distribute. It's illegal to post. It's illegal to buy. It's illegal to purchase. If you are in, it's also illegal to distribute and to sell to other people. So if you're involved in the commerce of AI, right, of specifically AI generated images of children in sexualized positions, then yes, you are committing a crime and it is illegal. So regardless of whether or not there's a demand or not, it doesn't really matter. That's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is how we're supposed to respond to it. Secondly, there's something that somebody brought up in the Twitch chat earlier, and that has to do with something that I found in researching for today, which is called the gamer's dilemma. Okay. And so for those of you who don't know, the gamer's dilemma is this. Okay. So the question that some people ask in trying to defend lolicon is, well, hang on, aren't there video games, where you can genocide an entire population, where you can go and shoot people like in Call of Duty, or if this is okay, if it's okay for you to simulate murder, like why is it okay for you to do this but not okay to engage in lolicon? I've heard people make that argument before, and this is the answer. Okay, it's because we don't have an established body of research that demonstrates that when people play video games, that they are more likely to commit violent crime, that they're more likely to murder, that they're more likely to commit assault. We do, however, have a huge established body of research that when children are exposed to sexualized images of themselves, that they are more likely to sexually assault and to sexually abuse other people. And we also have a large body of research that shows that child molesters use lolicon in order to sexually disinhibit children so that to make them more likely to become victims, which means that when you go onto a website, if you're one of those people that goes onto a website and you download or you consume or you participate in the commerce of lolicon, that you are contributing and financially incentivizing a business that helps to sexually assault children.
So
That's the reason why it's different.
Fairy Queen, the response to that would be that the organizations and institutions in the U.S. government, such as the U.S. Army, right, the military arm, right, has used video games in the past to get people to want to sign up, join, and engage in violent acts overseas. That would be the argument, is that we have examples of the government using this in order to draw in youth, kids, right, and recruit them into their things.
Okay, I just briefly wanted to address the video game
I want
thing.
to hear the response. I want to hear the response from Fairy Queen to that, though, because given that, right, that we do have some evidence.
It's true. So it's true that like we do use our video games in order to. I have heard this as well, that like the government uses video games in order to train potential soldiers before they go into battle. But again, what I don't see and what no one has ever been able to recruit.
Yes, to recruit.
Well, we can't.
They put out like a army. The army put out a shooter, and the hope was, right, that this would help recruit the youth. They put out a shooting video game, allowed children to download it and things like that. They marketed it to people who liked FPSs and things like that, and they used it as a recruitment tool. Now you can argue it wasn't very effective, etc. I don't know the stats on that. And recruitment is down overall, like in the last 5 years or so. But this is a tool that they, again, thought had a shot.
But the question is like how effective, like that is the question. That's the whole point of me bringing up the analogy, is that it is not, we don't have the consequence nearly to the same degree that we do for video games as we do in comparison to Lolly. That's the point. And it may well be true that the United States government has tried to use video games as a recruitment tool, right? But the question that I have, right, I'd have to look at the study, were the people that were tried to be who the government was trying to recruit, were they more likely to commit violent assault? Were they more likely to murder? Did they have a history of violent crime that was increased afterwards? Because all of the studies that I have regarding violent video games don't show that. What they show is that if you are playing a violent video game, you are temporarily aggressive for about like roughly an hour or two afterwards. So you're temporarily more aggressive. But in the long term, you are not more likely to murder. You're not more likely to steal. You're not more likely to commit violent crime as a consequence of viewing or like participating in a violent video game, as opposed to child pornography or lolicon, in which case we do have a wide body of research that shows that kids, when they watch it, when they have access to this, that they are more likely to sexually assault and to violate other children.
Okay, so I think the video game thing is very simple. Imagine a game where you just like stabbed someone in the face. That's all you did. You just loaded it up. You had various realistic faces and you stabbed them. That would basically be the equivalent of like the porn game sort of thing. You might say would be like a lolly game or whatever, something which purely exists for some weird sexual gratification. Most games aren't like that. You know, you're not stabbing someone in the face. You're running around, you get behind them, you stab them in the face, then you run away, then there's a bunch of them coming after you, you run, hide, you get a gun, you shoot them. It's an intense kind of exciting experience. It's not just something where you enjoy watching someone get stabbed in the face over and over again. So I think that's the real difference. I want to briefly go back to the AI thing, because remember when we debated pornography and I was one of the few guys to go against it? One of my big points was that the porn industry is full of women who are either trafficked or in some cases are underage. And the thing nobody will acknowledge about the underage thing is no one can actually fucking tell, because people cannot often tell the difference between a 15-year-old and a 20-year-old. And that's why the AI thing is going to be a huge mess, because it will cause a huge it will be this huge thing of like, is this too childish? Or because, like I said, there's an obvious thing with actresses who are employed because they look really young, which is why we get into the mess with AI. And I mean, they're already shaving their cunts all the time anyway, so, you know.
And you even got a real life example of that with what happened on Pornhub and how there was a
Pornhub
ton.
isn't even the
Let
worst. It's
𝕬𝖎
pretty mild.
go. Let 𝕬𝖎 go.
I was just all I was just
Sorry.
gonna say is that like, you know, where Pornhub had a lot of child pornography and you know, pornography that was a result of people being trafficked, and you know, you're just looking at a free pornography site, you can't just tell by the video, right? It's very easy to make that video look like a legitimate video. So
Yeah, the
we've
issue
got
would be
an
the intent.
example
If
of
you're
that.
seeking out that kind of content, the intent in that would be the issue. If you just accidentally are like, oh, this girl was actually just barely 18. They told her that she was gonna, you know, get fucked on camera for $500, but they actually gave her $20 and told her to fuck off. Like, that's really unethically sourced and super shitty or whatever. But if I'm like literally looking for a specific kind of porn that exploits people, and like, regardless of what everybody thinks, I mean, like, there is no such thing as consensual sex with children. So like, even if I find, you know, a video of like CSAM or whatever, like, that is the issue. My intent is to consume this kind of content. Like, these are two totally different things, right?
Okay, I think the issue I have there is if you go on Pornhub and you jerk off to a 15-year-old, but you think she's in her mid-20s, you still just jerked off to a 15-year-old. You just might never know. You might be,
Yeah, that's still
you're
a
in.
problem. The
It's still
intent
a
is the issue, though. The intent
the
is that
problem.
your target of like your sexual interest is a child. That is the
To
problem.
I think
in Vaush's explanation video, he claims, whether this is true or not, he claims that this was accidental, that he accidentally saved these. He did not. It was to be sorted, and that it was not like he just didn't check them. Right. That is his claim. So does that not speak to intent, like to your argument right there, Malcolm?
I actually
No,
think
because he has said in his own video where he did like his apology or whatever, that like he has, even in the clips that he's provided like previously, where he's come out and he said, you know, like when you are on these websites, you have to be super careful, like that you're not accidentally downloading lolly. He famously has that clip where he's like, yeah, and he says it's satire. I don't believe him at all. Where he's like, you know, sometimes you're on a hentai site and you're just like fucking whacking it, and then you're done and you're like, holy shit, that was lolicon. Like he's very acutely aware of how to navigate these spaces and how to avoid like this kind of content. So I don't believe that it was just like a whoopsie, I accidentally downloaded it it, especially with the image of the horse. Like, that was very clearly like a child lolly, like very clearly a child lolly. And I don't buy it. I think that's bullshit. It's just because of his own attestation that he knows how to navigate these sites, he knows how to avoid lolly. So how did he magically end up with it again? You know what I mean?
Okay. On that note, gang, I think we've done the rounds here. So what we're gonna do right now, we're gonna give closing statements. I want you all to tell people where they can find you if they want to see more of your stuff. And then there's a few people who want to call in. You guys can stay for call-ins if you'd like. You don't have to. I'm gonna let them call in and have their say. So yeah, if you are watching this and you've enjoyed the discussion today, please hit that like button and subscribe button if you're on YouTube. If you're on Twitch or Kick, hit that follow button. Donations are always appreciated, whether it be gift subs, gift bits, super chats. If you super chat, I'll try to read it on air. All these things are really helpful. So I do appreciate you all coming through today, and I want to give you a chance to shout yourselves out and have closing statements. We're going to start in the reverse order that we started. We're going to start with Malcolm, and we're going to end with 𝕾𝖍𝖎. So Malcolm, go ahead.
Thanks for having me on. I'm Malcolm FT Mongoose on everything. It's a little double entendre, FTM, female to mongoose. It's a little jokey poo. I stream mostly about trans stuff, but I also love indulging in internet drama. It's like my favorite thing in the whole fucking world. There are like 3 trans guys that stream on Twitch, so I will continue to use my minority status to farm clout. So if you don't follow me, you are in fact transphobic. On the topic at hand about lolicon, I will circle all the way back to the thing that I said at the beginning. The issue with the consumption of lolicon is, one, that the target of your sexual interest is a child. That says a lot about you and the kinds of predilections that you have, maybe even the paraphilias that you have. And at the very least, these are people who are very open and out about being into this kind of shit. You should be put on some kind of loliconographer list and kept far the fuck away from children. And anybody who disagrees with that is very sussy, and I would say that they would probably need to be put on the list as well. And I do, again, appreciate WhickTV making room for me. There is nothing that grinds my gears more than seeing trans people that are willing to defend lolicon in any kind of context. Like, congratulations, you just shot both of your feet and your kneecaps at the same fucking time. Please stop doing that. It is horrible. And that is all. Thank you. Thank you again.
Check him out, gang. He's great. Give him a follow or a like or whatever. Thank you for
Or you're
being here.
transphobic.
Yeah, I really appreciate you. Next up, Joe Brooks. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I guess my statement would be, I think this stuff is too oversimplified. It is very messy when people are discussing, one thing, the age of a drawing, and 2, basically trying to argue what is and isn't pedophilic. When you've got these very vague cartoon characters with exaggerated proportions, it's kind of a mess. What I think we will have to discuss in the future is where AI is going to go, because I think we're going to have some uncomfortable revelations in the future due to that. Anyway, I'm Joe Brooks. I don't stream, but I did. If you want to see me go on about how fucked up some of Japan's stuff is, particularly a very popular series called 𝕵𝖎𝖎, which people are very much in denial about how clearly eroticized its rape scenes are. I've put up a censored video on that on my channel, if anyone wants to go have a look at that. I wish we could show it uncut, because I always think it's good to actually see what we're talking about, but sadly, 𝕵𝖎𝖎 fans will get me banned if I do that again. So that's my closing statement.
Gang, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you. Check him out if you'd like to see that kind of content. Next up, Fairy Queen. Go ahead.
Hi guys, you can find me at Fairy Queen's Cottage on YouTube. I'm going to go ahead and drop my link in both the Twitch and the YouTube chat if you want to find me. Please go ahead and click there and give me a follow. Always appreciated, never expected. I typically like to stream on feminist content. I like to do debate panels. If you want to come and yell at me, let me know. As far as like my closing statement, so these are the 3 things that I want to people to remember about what I said tonight, okay? And I'm responding specifically to arguments that I've heard other people make. 1, okay, the argument that it's just a picture, it doesn't hurt anyone. What's the harm? It's not a real child. It is harm. There is significant harm in the production and in the consumption of lolly. 1, because it incentivizes the business model. if people go onto these websites, click and download these images, buy manga books where this type of depiction is consumed, that means that you are financially contributing to an art form that is used by child molesters in order to disinhibit children. And if children are exposed to it, which they're more likely to be exposed to it if you choose to consume it and therefore contribute to the algorithm for it, that means that you are financially contributing to actual abuse. That's why it's wrong and that's why it's bad. Finally, and I want everyone to please remember before I leave tonight that lolly is not a protected form of free speech in the United States. It's only protected in the sense that you can go home with a notepad and pen and you can draw something weird, but it's not protected in the sense you can't buy it, you can't access it from other places, and you can't distribute it. And if you are doing that, then you are committing a federal crime. And that's all I have to say for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, check her out. She put the links in chat. She made it easy for you. Click those links, right? And then click the subscribe, follow, whatever button, right? Like, do it. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. And last, but certainly not least, 𝕾𝖍𝖎. Closing statement. Where can people find you?
Hey, so you can find me on a lot of different platforms under the same username. It's 𝕾𝖍𝖎 on everything. I'm on Twitch. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Kick now. I stream on X. You can follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky. Basically, I just do political content. From a left libertarian perspective, I talk a lot about things that I've experienced in my life, such as like addiction and abuse, but I also just like to debate all kinds of topics. I'm a big free speech advocate. If you ever want to come on and debate me, you are absolutely free to. I'm doing call-ins after this panel, actually. And yeah, so come check me out. I've also got a coffee. If you've liked my arguments today and you want to support me, you can go to my coffee and give me a donation. That would be awesome. As a closing statement, I just want to make that, going back to the comparison to video games, I think it's interesting that we need to go around in order to tie abusive behavior to lolicon, but we don't accept that for video games. For example, there have been people that have gone and shot up schools that played a lot of violent video games. And again, there's several different factors there, right? It's not just the video games. But with lolicon, we need to go around. We can't draw that direct factor in the same way we can draw it to video games. That doesn't mean that it's not gross or that it's moral or that it should be promoted. But I just don't think that we should do feels over reels here, regardless of how disgusting it is. And you are free to debate me afterwards if you disagree.
Thank you for being here. Brittany Simon, thank you for the raid. Welcome to the stream. You just missed the panel portion. We are in the call-in portion. So if you have thoughts on Vaush or Lolly and you wanna sound off, get in that Discord. Jump backstage. We'll pull you in and we'll see what you have to see. Couple super chats before I let you all free. $2 from Parallax. Tell Joe 0 people want to watch his anime shit. There you go. Thank you for the $2. $5 from Cryborn to say FQ and Malcolm W. Thank you for the $5. Now, you are released if you want to go, but we got a bunch of callers that want to talk to y'all. So if you'd like to stay, please, you're welcome to stay. Let's bring in, I think I know the order here, right? We're going to try to get it in the order, but we're going to be brief. We're going to bring you on. We're going to have concise conversations, and then we're going to make room. So that's what we're going to do. Let's bring in the next person. You're up. Mando, you're live. What you got?
Hey, what up, Wick?
Yo, you're live. What you got for the panel?
I have a question in regards to just one question. I have a question for Joe. I want to point something out about what you said about AI. First off, AI are trained using specific images.
Mhm.
And what AI draw is based on the keywords that a human enters. So what you get from an AI might be what an AI chooses to draw, but it's choosing to draw what it's drawing based on your keywords that you are inputting. and the images that have been fed into it to train it on how to draw what it's drawing. That's number one. Number two, your berserk take is kind of baffling that you think berserk is all about sexual assault, et cetera, et cetera. It's 350 chapters, and you only want to talk about like the 2 or 3 chapters that actually have those situations happen.
Okay, I can respond to both if you like. If you just give me a sec. Do you have any other questions?
We're gonna keep it to that. He may, but he's not gonna get to ask them because we gotta keep it.
Yeah, we got a lot of people in the chat, so hurry up, Joe.
Okay. Okay, so first of all, the AI, the training on image thing is completely correct. But the word thing, I think that's kind of goes into my point, which is, for example, pubic hair would not appear unless you really pushed it to draw pubic hair. Similarly, it's producing lots of women who look sort of Asian. And this is not people asking for Asian women. It's just obvious that it's kind of being fed that. It's either being fed that or whatever it uses to decide what people want is what's getting it to do that. The thing about saying that AI is just giving people what they want from requests is that the AI doesn't just look at a word and exactly translate that word. It basically looks at the word, and then it's usually got tons of words, and then it kind of tries to figure out what the best image would be. Which is why
that's a part of the training, right?
That would be a part of the training, get all these weird mutations.
Okay.
But the point is, just with the pubic hair thing, is that AI naturally assumes women shouldn't have pubic hair, which is kind of worrying. But that was kind of my point there. The berserk thing, I'm sorry, but berserk, first of all, it's not 1 or 2 chapters. You get points where it's just like nearly a whole solid chapter of just a woman being raped in various positions. There's tons of images which are hypersexualized in the way they're drawn. Clearly, there's literal, I mean, we bring up horses, that's in there too. Big horse with big cock towering over a woman. There's so many moments like that, and it's clearly drawn to be erotic, which is, I don't really, like I've said, I don't think this stuff should be illegal. It just annoys me that a lot of the berserk base will pretend it's not there when it's clearly both drawn to be erotic and also, I mean, Koska gets nearly raped like 6 times. Like, you've got a section where she's being grabbed by some demon, and it's got like a massive, my point is there's so much of it. I think saying it's just 1 or 2 moments, it's nowhere comparable to something like Game of Thrones, which is way milder and way more normal.
So Koska only happened to Koska once. And that was in the golden age.
Okay.
That was early on in the story.
I'm throwing a flag on the play. I'm throwing a flag on the play. I don't care about berserk. Sorry, Mando.
Okay, you can watch my video on it if you want.
Thank you, Wick.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Wick.
Okay, please. Question for the panel involving the topic. Right, the AI thing was fair, but let's stick to the lolly. Let's stick to Vaush, okay? Or other creators that have credible accusations. Let's bring on the next contestant on whatever this is. I think it was this. Taiga.
Yeah, hi. You can just call me Alex. Yeah,
Alex.
This is just a username.
Okay. What you got for us?
So question for the panel. I was only watching for like the last 50 minutes or so I wasn't able to catch the whole thing. But oh shoot, I'm nervous. Sorry, 1 second.
We aren't scary. Take your time. What you got for us?
One of the big problems with Vaush and his presentation of him having things in his sorted to file is that in the same picture we can see that there's multiple folders of porn. It might we might not know what's inside those folders, but we know that there's porn in them based off of the thumbnails in the folders, and you can see that there's more lolly in there. So we can already see Vaush is not consistent with the fact that oh, like I'm just accidentally stumbling upon like lolly porn. So um I don't think um I don't think it's wrong to be harsh on someone who is like inconsistent with the fact that like their fantasies seem to be going everywhere. Like it's not no longer just wanting to be a horse fucking a kid. It's always like it's always centered around um it's always centered around like young petite characteristics that they can like overcome and stuff like that, you know.
We'll let the panel respond. We'll give it to 𝕾𝖍𝖎 first, and then see what everyone else thinks. Go ahead, 𝕾𝖍𝖎.
I mean, I don't really buy the accident thing either. I think that that's a very common way that people deal with embarrassment, unfortunately. And it's not like Vaush hasn't done, little cope behaviors before in the past. I think that that's very human, though. In terms of what's in his porn folder, I mean, I don't know. And I don't want to know. And I also don't think that it's correct to make a ton of assumptions either, because we don't know. I mean, you like I said, you can speculate, but that's just conjecture.
Yeah,
So we need
that's
to
fair.
be we need to be really careful with like what we're doing with conjecture, right? Because there is a possibility that like such conjecture would be wrong, and then you have situations like the example that I brought up where this guy had, he only had lolly. He didn't have any actual child pornography. He still did like 3 years prison time. I think that's pretty authoritarian. So, I mean, maybe I think a better solution there would be like a rehabilitation program or some kind of mandatory therapy, not 3 years in prison where he can go learn how to offend more severely from other,
So, so
inmates.
a couple of things. A couple of things to address from that. So, regarding the rehabilitation point, I'm not sure if not everyone agrees with me on this. My understanding is that the most effective form of therapy is actually chemical castration. We call it therapy, but really what it is, it's the administration of, I think Lupron is one of the drugs. That's usually like when they say therapy for sex offenders, that's typically what they mean. Now, there is some types of CBT that you can be involved in. But just so everyone is aware, when you look at the actual recidivism rates for child sex offenders specifically, they, in comparison to other types of violent crime, are relatively low. So, I think this was according to the Office of Justice. When you look up the average rate of reoffense after 3 years for a child sexual offender is about 5%. That means that 95% of the
Hold on a
people
sec
that
here.
are arrested after 3 years. Now, that rate does increase over time. So, at about 20 years post that, the rate increases to about roughly 24%. But that's still, if we're talking about, and I agree with you, that's still far too many, and you would be right. But when we're thinking about rehabilitation and what it means is, frankly, drugs. It means chemicals. It means chemical castration. So
For lolly,
that's the first
would
thing
you,
I just
regarding.
want you to
That's the first thing
clarify
regarding.
though. You're talking about like actual offenders though, not just people that look at lolicon and nothing else. Like that
Right,
study.
but the reason like why the lolicon matters because of the report that I told you about before from the FBI, which is that when people have folders where they are downloading images of child erotica, a lot of child erotica, that is a sign that they more than likely are that they are likely to offend against children, or they're likely to be a pedophile. That's something that they consistently find. I'm not even just talking about like the literal horrific lolly. I'm talking about collecting toys, collecting books, collecting clothes, collecting
Funko
weird
Pops,
example.
anime?
Go. Well, strange types of paraphernalia that they will deliberately hoard and keep as shrines within their homes so that they can access it freely at will without potentially being caught online. That's why they download it. So, like when we're talking specifically about like why FQ, not why this specifically matters, it matters because it's a sign. And I want to say one more thing. I think then I want to piggyback off of something that Malcolm said earlier, which is really true too. Folks, when you are out in the world and you are trying to make decisions about who is safe to bring and to introduce to your family, who is safe to bring to your friend group, who is safe to come and babysit your children, who do you want to invite to Christmas dinner, who do you want to be in your server, who do you want to interact with online? When you're asking yourself these questions, okay, I think it's a ridiculous standard that we have to wait to actually see them assault someone before we say, oh, this person seems to be like a predatory individual who I probably shouldn't be associated with.
This
That's
paraphernalia?
that's an absurd amount of standard. It's not just what so the report says it's not just having one thing. It's about having huge absurd amounts of this type of material like throughout your home. That's what the report said specifically. And again, like I can post the report if other people would like to see
In
it.
terms of
Can I have the report too? Yeah.
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
Do you have the report?
I was just gonna. I was
Keldor,
just gonna
you
say
finished, and we gotta
quickly.
get to the next caller. So,
Yeah, no, it's just really quickly. I was just saying though, in terms of rehabilitation, though, I would think that there's definitely like more effective methods for people that haven't
Than chemical
offended.
Not for
castration.
fucking
No,
pedophiles. Not
well,
for
no,
pedophiles.
because you're talking about people that have offended, though. I'm talking about people that haven't offended. These are two very different things, okay? Like, I just want that to be known.
Even if they haven't gone into treatment, you can't just like switch them out of what their sexual interests are.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for
Okay.
calling in, Alex. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you. Have a great night. Oops. Okay. Next on the list. Rashad, you're live. Oh, he's deafened. Come on, Rashad.
Uh-oh.
Come on, Rashad. What are you doing? Oh, there he is. Undeafen yourself. You got it. You did it to yourself, brother. You can't even hear me. I don't know why I'm yelling at you.
Yo, chill,
Okay,
chill.
there we go. There we go. Okay, I was DMing you. Okay.
Chill. All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, what you got for us?
Yep.
All right. I wanted to ask, I'm not sure if this is an appropriate question now, but I wanted to ask, should there be a conversation around like addiction to pornographic material in general? Because I feel like part of the conversation that's not really being talked about is how like deep in the depths of this stuff Vaush was in terms of like where his content was, um, how brazen he was talking about it. A lot of the, insane commentary about, sometimes you're just watching porn and then, 5 hours in, you find yourself, thinking about how young the girls were. It's like he seems so like deep and just lost in what he's into that he seems to have lost like a perception of like what's normal or what's appropriate. I think that the fact that the content was on his work computer is also really indicative of an addiction.
Yeah.
Should we be having a conversation about how deep into this stuff people are, even outside of just
We're going to next
I
week.
actually
if
think
I
that's
may.
a really great point.
Yeah, if I may.
Why
We are
can't I
going to
hear
have a
you?
conversation about this next week about porn addiction. Is that really a thing? It has been contested on my show before. Fairy Queen and Erudite had a nice little back and forth about that. I think it warrants further discussion. So, yes, I think it's a great question to ask, Rashad. And yeah, that's why we're going to be talking about it next week at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you.
Can you mute the
Yeah, I
stream?
think if Vaush is saying
Yeah.
5 hours, that's an addiction.
Well,
So
from my perspective, and that's what I think it is. I think that it is an addiction issue.
Hold up, I gotta click out because I can't hear you guys, and I gotta play the stream in the back to hear you. So I'll just dip out and let someone else come in.
Oh,
Because
you can't hear?
really
Okay. Well, I don't know why you
issues
can't
going
hear us. We'll let you guys.
It's all good.
Gooning will be the fall.
And that's
is the answer to that
my
question.
perception of it, is that it is an addiction thing and not a predatory thing in his case.
Yeah, I actually just did a
I
talk on addiction at a
disagree.
college regarding not pornography, but more how social media apps work. But I would say actually that's a good reason to have a porn folder, so you don't have to go looking.
I mean, I mentioned this like in our back and forth between Erudite, like, and I disagree with the idea that sex addiction or porn addiction is real. And I actually think that it's dangerous to victims and to people to say and to promote the idea that it's real, because the consequence of promoting that it's
But you can be
real is
addicted to anything.
I think
Like,
it's not only does the APA not only did the APA remove hypersexual disorder from the DSM-5 and remove any mention of porn addiction, like, from the DSM-5, which was previously, like, at least referred to in the DSM-4. But on top of that, there is evidence that people have tried to use the excuse of porn addiction or sex addiction for sex offenders, like, when they are convicted, in court. And so the concern is that if we normalize the idea that sex addiction and pornography addiction is real, that if you find somebody that does have pornography like this on their computer, that does have child pornography or has a history of assaulting children, when they are convicted, they will simply say, I had a sex addiction. I had a pornography addiction. I was compelled
Yeah,
beyond my
that's
ability to
the
free
issue with
will.
it. That's
Yeah.
like the big issue with it, where like you could say that there's like addictive qualities to consuming pornography, especially when it gets to the point where it like interacts with your ability to like function, like day to day or whatever. But like you can be addicted to porn without like yoinking it to like inappropriate pornographic material. So like that excuse doesn't even fucking work in this situation, right?
I'm
I
not
think the
even
thing
saying
is
it's a porn addiction specifically. You can develop addiction to anything. So I'm not
yes.
necessarily saying it's porn specifically. I think that in his case, it's become very habitual. So it's not that like it's the porn. It's probably
So
I don't know.
I have
To
a
speculate, probably something to have to do with ADHD. But
I
Well, I mean,
have
if he
I
was
have a I have
habitually
a thought on
downloading
this
real
that I'd like
CP,
to
that would
share.
probably be a fucking issue,
I
right?
think
well,
OnlyFans is a good
as
example
far
of
as we
porn
know,
addiction.
Is this
hasn't.
thing
So
on?
That's
Can
why
you
that
hear
was a
me?
hypothetical question.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, am I
Yes, I
allowed to
can hear
speak on
you.
my panel? I hope I am. $2 from Fondue to say, where can I find Fairy Queen studies again? But Fairy Queen, can you just link them in my YouTube chat for Fondue?
Sure. I have a lot
Appreciate
of
it.
actually, you know what I'll do? If you're in Wix Discord, don't you have like a research
I do. Put them
chat?
there.
Because I have a lot of like links. I'll dump
Absolutely.
them all there, like at the end of the stream is what
Absolutely.
I'll do.
To the point though, I think that the reason a lot of people are hesitant, such as Fairy Queen, are hesitant to call it an addiction is because, especially in more left-leaning spaces, we tend to excuse bad actions. We use it as an excuse or a shield, really, to excuse bad actions. Now, I don't think that's enough of a reason to not acknowledge that there might be a possible addiction there, because even if you are addicted to something, I don't think that should excuse or lessen, right, the action that you did. It still should be, you should still have consequences, and they should still
I don't
fit the
disagree with that at
crime.
all.
Now that
I,
said, right, I am not a doctor or a licensed professional. I don't know if it's actually an addiction or not. That's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about the subject, and talk about porn in general and how harmful or benign porn in general is. I think it's an excellent discussion point, but I do think that there is something to be said about the way we treat pornography and sex work and other such topics in this space. It's worth a discussion, and so I'm going to reach out to some people, maybe see if we can get that going. Okay, let's bring in the next caller.
Can I just do like a quick little point off that? Just with the claim about it being
yes, go ahead.
like an excuse on the left, I really think that's true. Like you've had a lot of people go after 𝕬🐠, for example, for her addiction. I've experienced that, and I've been, sober since 2016.
Yes, but
So it was a
𝕬🠠
long, long
used
time
the
ago.
addiction as a shield as well. And a lot of
I'm
people
just saying
did.
that in the long term, like I've seen a lot of people on the left use that as a punching bag thing. That's all I'm saying. I don't think that they're as accepting as they say.
She just uses as a shield as the criticism.
Yeah. Tuna, what you got?
Hey, what's going on? We've talked enough about the quality of the moral of people that consume lolly. I want to talk about the behavior of the opposition for a moment. I think it's a little pathetic that people would go online and argue in favor of what is clearly sub-ethical behavior in exchange for attention, time, a sense of being more logical. They would invoke the concept of whataboutism, then engage in it consistently, saying, why is it that this? Why is it that that? Logical consistency, is this thing held above what you should be like holding not only people who are consuming it to higher ethical standards, but also higher like standards for their own personal growth. I want to know what's going on with the space, whether or not it's this one or other spaces where we're talking about the technicalities of whether or not something is going to eventually, via 1 to 7 degrees of separation, cause a child harm. if I have a friend that's watching Lolly, they're a porn addict. If I have a friend that is smoking drugs, they're a drug addict. I'm not going to be like, oh, that's fine. Your addiction is a mental problem that needs help. I'm going to say, do something about it, or I'm not your friend. I'm not supporting you. I'm not spending time with it. And I'm certainly not going to be going online defending strangers who are influencing tens of thousands of people, many of which are trans and children, into becoming more and more addicted to pornography, more and more isolated and sexually dysfunctional. What is the ultimate point of defending Lolly?
Question for you, Tuna. Do you think
Go
that
for it.
Charles Manson was entitled to a defense lawyer?
I think Charles Manson, for the consistency of the court, yeah, because we have like a legal body.
Certainly.
A legal body is a lot different, in my opinion.
I
But
understand.
yeah, we can keep going.
Yes, but
yeah, we need
that would be
evidence. We
the-
need to take it
that
before
would
a
be
trial.
that would be the parallel I would draw. And yes, there are differences. This is an illegal court, etc. But accusations come out all the time, right? Some have more weight than others. We can look at the whole Mama Max drama. He made tons of accusations, right? That people just accepted. No one wanted to stick up for the people he accused, right? No one did. And later on, it came out that those accusations were false. And so,
Sure.
right,
Can I-
and
okay.
so, wouldn't it have been nice? Wouldn't it have been nice? I guess I would ask, would you have given that same speech to the people who would stick up for the people that Mama Max accused? Would you have given that same speech at that same time?
No, because I think it's false equivalency. We're not defending individuals, asking whether or not they have done the thing. We are currently broad scale arguing whether the thing they've done, which is confirmed to have been done, is even that bad of a thing. Am I going to go to court and say, hey, listen, he killed the guy, but is murder really that bad? He stole from the guy, but why are we going to try this guy for murder when Joe Biden is supporting a genocide in Palestine? You're not going to go after like this argument in favor of the crime itself. Like, do we need to prove that somebody has done something? Yeah. Do we need to defend the action in this rigorous way when it's pretty clear cut whether or not something is like submoral? I'm not here in a court even. I'm asking, why are we defending the thing that is agreed to be bad?
Responses? Mic drop?
Okay, yeah, sure, I'll go. Okay, first of all, I'm in here not because I follow the streamer stuff. I personally think kids shouldn't be following any streamers. There are better things for kids to do. But as for Lolly, well, I came in mostly because I think whataboutism is actually important. It is worth pointing out that there are probably people very much like screaming about Lolly who would accidentally jerk off to a 15-year-old on Pornhub. It's worth bringing this stuff up because it is actually a messy area.
I can guarantee
I would have liked to get
Joe, that
What?
I've never jerked it to a 15-year-old.
How would you know?
Never.
If you've jerked off to Pornhub, you wouldn't know if it was a 15-year-old or not. It's just a fact. You cannot. There's all these issues.
No,
when it
we're
comes to
talking. You're
pornography
talking
with-
about a confirmation of the fact. But why is somebody jerking off to something that they themselves believe it to be ambiguous whether or not someone is 15? If you
Well,
were jerking
it's
off to
right
that, I'm
now.
not. I want to make a clear point. If you are uncomfortable with the thing that you were jerking off to, stop.
Well,
If it's ambiguous, stop.
The thing is, with what Vaush was looking at, the image I saw, which was two girls holding what looked like a bucket and a horse ejaculating into it, I just laugh. I'm sorry, I find it
Okay.
really weird and bizarre.
You're looking at a
But I
porn
don't-
addict. You're looking at a
I-
porn addict, though, and this is important, a porn addict that understands deep porn terminology, but for some reason wants to claim that he can't tell when something looks prepubescent.
Well, I think the thing with
Why are we
Vaush is
buying that?
Vaush, in my opinion, is a hypocrite. But I also cannot look at it and go, oh my God, this guy's going to molest children. It's too weird for that. It's why I brought up the stats on all the people jerking off to ponies at the start. Like, a lot of this stuff is very bizarre and confusing, which is why I don't want to just throw him in and go, oh, he just wants to fuck a kid.
Do
It
we
seems
want
more like
no,
he's developed some bizarre fetish. I thought the horse thing was a joke. I find it funny, but it turns out it's not.
okay. There are things other than molesting children that are bad, and one of them would be popularizing addiction to pornography to such a degree that you are consuming extremely dysfunctional content. Whether we're talking about jokes about the horse thing or these My Little Pony things or anything of that matter, when you're a person like that, why is it that this is a very influential figure with a lot of people that are already clearly communicating that they are dealing with various sexual dysfunctions? And this is most clear, he tries to reach out to a lot of despondent youth, incels. We have a lot of people inside of his community that are saying, I used to be an incel, he pulled me over. What is he pulling them over to?
Well, you'd have to answer that because I don't watch Vaush or many streamers in general.
That's the answer. Pedophilia and degeneracy. An absolute lack of concern for the nuances of sexual function.
Well, here's the thing. What basically happened is he's been caught. He's been caught red-handed with really bizarre pornography on his system. This is more of equivalent of it's like when an actor acts high and mighty and then they get caught, like say they grope someone or something. In my opinion, worse than what Vaush did, but that's me.
It's the anti-gay Republican sucking cock in a bathroom incident all over again. But even worse, it's kind of like a little Kevin Spacey pilled. We are talking about children, the most vulnerable, the most unnuanced. You can't, even with rape fantasies, you can engage in play that we're talking about the most undefensible. And he is going to pretend that he can't see the fucking trees from the forest. That's a liar, sure. Why are we talking about the lie? Why are we not talking about the mass exposure of, like, I'm a popular, nuanced individual, so smart and everything. Sorry, guys. I didn't know that this was child depicted. I definitely thought that it was instead this entirely other thing that no one's ever heard of, that you'd have to be on a porn site for like $500 to understand.
Short stack. That's what he said. Short stack, I believe.
Short stack goblin. Short stack. Oh, you know the way that goblins are. Oh, you guys know what goblin porn looks like. Clearly, everybody knows what I'm referencing. That indicates a very depraved culture that he's communicating, that he's cultivating.
To be clear, I had no idea what goblin porn was until SFO showed me. I regret.
You see, here's the thing: when you say goblin, I put that in the same weird. Because has anyone seen any images? Because there's this anime called Dragon's Maid. I've never watched it because it looks awful, but for some reason it seems fairly popular. And some of the girls in that look like I said, like garden gnomes without the beard. And I'm like, why is this so big? But then again, the anime community
I
is
don't want to
weird.
get bogged down in specific animes.
We're good. We're good.
Tuna,
Stop giving us recommendations.
Yeah. Okay, Tuna. Closing thoughts, Tuna, and then we're gonna get to the next caller. And I'm sorry you couldn't make it. Again, gang.
Nah, that's good. I got off the bus. Yeah, I walked through a homeless encampment. Yeah, you wouldn't even want to have heard the things that I heard in passing. Closing thoughts are, if you're going to be an influencer, you have to have a higher standard than just whether or not you're turning everybody into molesters, or if you're a molester. like you're supposed to have some virtue about you, and you should have some virtue enforced amongst one creator to another. So
what's
defending
about you, Tuna?
What's virtuous about me? I would say go to therapy, stop masturbating to fucking cringe ass porn, fix your fucking sexual dysfunction, or, God forbid, be a little discerning about what you share about it, because you don't want to spread your mutagen, your terrible brain. Anyway,
okay. Thank you for being here, Tuna. Peace out.
Void me. See ya.
Okay, we got two more callers. Okay, we'll be as quick as we can. You're live. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. You're live. What's your thought?
Okay. So to 𝕾𝖍𝖙 and the British egg, I don't know your name. Sorry. What do you guys even find the concept weird of lolly in the first place? Because the way you guys talk about it, it seems like it's become so normalized to you that you don't even know like what it looks like to everybody else. Are you aware of how weird it looks to have lolly?
If I say that somebody that is caught with lolly on their computer and that like
Been doing this
a
whole debate.
consequence that the consequence of that should be that they should get therapy, do you think that that indicates that I think it's normal?
Answer the question, or are you just going to keep doing what you've been doing the whole debate, which is like giving really weird answers to very simple questions? Is it weird? Yes or no? Do you think it looks?
Yeah, it is weird.
Thank
I
you.
think that's pretty obvious based
So-
on my answers.
I feel like you guys could have covered so much more ground if you started doing this from the beginning. So now that
I'm
we've
pretty
established
sure we
that
joked all the time.
outside,
I said it was my opening statement. I mean, if people don't
just
listen,
laughed.
that's not
That's why
my.
people got
it's great.
mad
And then
because
the
I
entire
wasn't
actual
like
time
I
we
was
had to
thought it was more funny than
swallow your-
horrifying.
Anyway, I'm not done. I still had more I was going to say. So now that we've established that at least it looks weird from the outside, why is it so difficult to engage with other people when they're making their arguments as far as like the points that they're making about the actual harm that it causes?
Okay, I think the reason is that we're just not necessarily sure how much harm it actually does cause. For example, one of my big issues when we bring up exposure to children is we bring up stuff like, I think the example was Kim Possible, and what I find interesting there is that talks more to the weird way people have began gaining these fetishes for cartoon characters, which I believe probably relates to kids looking up their favorite like whatever show and then being exposed to these weird pornographic images. But that's not strictly lolly. That's the weird connection we have to this growth in groups like furries and things like that.
Lolly. It is not strictly lolly. That's correct. Good job. I'm proud of you. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about lolly. So I don't know why you're bringing.
That is where it ended up going. That was the example.
Because you took it there because you can't actually talk about lolly. I don't know why.
No, I was giving Kim Possible as an example, so that's why I responded by talking about
No,
and the thing
remember
about
that
lolly,
Kim Possible is really just like a side thing to a broader
okay,
point.
the thing about lolly is a lot of it is based in these, like, I would guess you'd call them mo animes. They tend, I don't know, I don't really watch that stuff, but my understanding is they're like cute girls doing cute stuff and blah blah blah. Not really my scene, but
Fairy Queen multiple times throughout the debate have specifically said images of children getting raped, which is what the lolly is the purest form of lolly. I know that there's a lot of vagueness about like cartoons of different ages. If like how can you tell a 17 and a 19-year-old apart? I get all that.
Exactly.
We're talking about like Lolita Lolly, like the child, like the baby, like young kids in sexually compromising situations. So
okay, so let's take this to the extreme. So let's make it clear we're going to cut off any of this what's age and just go, okay, it looks like a 4-year-old, all right?
I want to let other people in this convo. I want to give it to
I
𝕾𝖍𝖙
think we are getting somewhere here, though.
I can give a concise answer here, and that's my concern is not that I think that lolly is like normal and like I think it is problematic, okay, and I don't think it's good. At the same time, I don't think it's the same thing or causes the same harm nearly anywhere to the degree of actual CP. And I don't think that lolly alone is enough evidence to accuse somebody of a serious crime. That's my thing. I don't think it's good. At the same time, we need to be able to understand that things are different levels of bad and not think in such black and white terms.
So I have a really quick question. 𝕾𝖍𝖙, do you think that if somebody says kids are hot, do you think that person is a pedophile?
Probably.
Okay, so if somebody is yoinking it to images of children getting raped, is it fair to call that person a pedophile or no?
I mean, a lolly is a depiction.
Yeah, a drawing of a child getting raped.
It's not it's not real though.
It doesn't matter if it's real. You're getting off. If I fantasize day in and day out about like fucking babies, does that make me a pedophile?
About the caller here because he's done a very important thing.
Joe, stop. Malcolm,
but it's just going to be the same shit we've been fighting.
Like I just want an answer to that, where it's like we have a very clear answer where it's like somebody says, "I think kids are hot," pedophile. Somebody yoinks it to like an actual like depiction of a kid getting raped. God, I don't know. I got lost.
Because I think that there's a pretty significant difference. Hold on.
If I draw a picture of your mom and then I jack off to it, I'm attracted to your mom. It doesn't matter if it's a picture or not. Anyway, I do have to go to dinner, so See ya. Bye. I'm gonna fuck both of your moms. Fuck you guys both.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Okay, well, I think he was at least willing to give. I was getting there with a 4-year-old because
But
then
just
we can make it
We're not
very
gonna get
clear
to
and there's
that
no
Malcolm's
there's no
question.
ambiguity.
I don't now it is gonna depend on what
Well,
the image
well,
is
I
of
think
the
if something
subject.
clearly looks like a kid, it's a lot clearer what we're arguing about.
I just have a very strong belief that there's a big difference between actually seeking out like material that, exploits children in real life and something that is a representation of it. I think that when you equate the two, that causes a lot of problems.
Well, so hypothetically, totally fake world. If you could produce CP and no child was harmed, would you be fine with people being able to consume that for sexual purposes?
I don't know how you would be able to produce real CP
That's why
without
it's a
child being
hypothetical. So say
harmed.
hypothetically we could produce it where no child was harmed and there was no harm, but somebody still was sexually attracted to a depiction of a child engaging in sex with an adult, rape. If they consumed that, would they be a pedophile?
I would say yes, because there's a difference between
Then why even
the
bring up the harm?
actual image and
Then why even bring up the
a
harm? Because the
depiction.
harm is irrelevant. It's that
Okay, no,
the
hold on. Let
sexual
me
intent is the
clarify this. I
child.
think you're missing each other.
Because
Hold on, Keldoj. I think you guys are missing each other. So what Keldoj is saying is that if it's an actual like photograph or video of actual children, then they have a problem with it. But and correct me if I'm wrong, Keldoj, but what you're saying is if it's a drawing, if someone draws it like in a cartoon fashion, then you don't.
I still think it's not good and it's problematic, but I think that it's on a lower level
Okay.
than actual child pornography.
Yeah, my question is just specifically about the harm because you keep bringing it up where it's like it's a drawing, nobody's hurt, nobody's hurt, nobody's hurt. But like you would still have an issue if you could hypothetically create this material where nobody was hurt. You would be like, no, this is still wrong. So the harm is completely irrelevant. So why even bring it up? Like it's the sexual intent that is the issue, and that's what nobody is like comfortable saying for whatever reason. The sexual intent of like being attracted to children is the fucking problem, and that is the harm.
Do you think anime is like a realistic depiction of like how humans act and like are?
That's not the.
That's not even like a one-to-one, but I'll be fair and say that depending on what it is, sure. I'm not really like an avid anime consumer, but I could assume that it might be.
I would say no, but just because there's a difference between having like a fantasy and exploring that in a way that's not specifically looking to exploit anybody. That doesn't mean that it can't be used for exploitation or that it can't be used with bad intent, okay? Because that happens with regular pornography too. Regular pornography is used to groom children. I just think that there's a big difference, and that when you put the two on the same level or even a similar level, then you are really trying to think of the right way to phrase this. You're really doing a disservice to people that are actual victims of real child
Oh,
pornography.
bro, get off the high horse with that shit. Like
Okay,
that
guys,
has nothing to do with what the fuck we're talking
we've
about.
got a guest in. Let's let them
The
talk for a bit.
principle of the issue again is that the sexual intent
Well,
is to like be aroused by children. Like that definitionally makes somebody a pedophile. Like the intent is the problem. Like the intent is that you
prove
are
that
aroused by
lollipop is
a
any
power difference
more.
or causing harm to a child. That's the point.
Well, how does lolicon directly cause harm to a child? Like
We have
directly?
talked
I've
about this
already
endlessly.
Well,
Endlessly.
not
Fairy Quid and
directly
both of
though.
us.
It
Both of us.
requires multiple variables.
So does
Okay.
fucking everything. What is the harm in smoking meth? There's like 30 fucking variables that affect that as well.
Oh,
Does
okay.
that just
Well,
mean
would
it's
you
like, oh, it's
say
too nuanced. We can't talk about it.
would you
Can
say
we
that
let
like
this
smoking
guy who's
meth is
just
the same
came
thing
in
as
talk
smoking
for
a
a bit?
cigarette? Like,
Is that a serious question?
Okay, I want to give it to our caller, Azzy. Hi.
What's going on?
Yo, you called in. What you got?
Do we all agree that Vaush is addicted to this stuff?
I have no
Yes,
idea.
probably.
You have no idea. He
Probably.
has archives.
Well, that's the thing. I don't know Vaush. I've remembering back. Someone
You
said
don't
he
have
had
to
a lot
know
of
him.
it.
The
So...
evidence is. I don't mean to interrupt, but I've been on my my warpath on this for a long time. You don't need to know him. There's evidence out there where he has archives of this stuff. So, and he's been talking about this since 2018. Apparently, it's been a joke. So this is before his brain was fully formed. So I can only assume that he's been watching and talking about this stuff since he was a kid.
I would assume so. That
Alright,
kind of
so
fits my idea that people probably do just look up this stuff on Earth and then get weird fetishes.
Statistically, that would pan out just because
Mm,
people are being able to access porn younger and younger.
yes,
So
way younger.
okay, so for instance, just to feel out the room, is anybody equivocating or is anybody like trying to defend Vaush?
I don't see him as a
not
likely
really.
pedophile personally, but I think he's hypocritical and I think it's quite
The
funny.
contention.
But I don't hate
and
him.
what about okay, and
I
what
don't
about
really care.
and what about lolicon?
My stance is it's a annoyingly messy term because people are basically trying to argue often about the age of a drawing, which I find quite silly. But characters which clearly look like kids, even if they're animated, I find kind of gross. But it also fits into that weird area once again, like furries, with people jerking off to weird stuff because they've been exposed to it and gained a fetish for it. And that makes it very hard to judge if that's necessarily would, connect to actual
it's
kids.
a causality versus correlation. Yeah,
Yes.
but what if we were say the lolicon is based upon the unhealthy beauty standards of women in Asia?
That's what I was talking about with the AI, with like
No,
producing all these women with no
AI.
pubic hair.
Well, that exists in Western culture too, right? With
It
like
does too.
pageants. Like
But I
beauty
mean,
pageants are not fucking normal at all. Like
yeah, they're
I
very
don't think you should
creepy.
be dressing 6-year-olds up like that. That's fucked.
Oh god, some of them are so
True,
disturbing.
but let's okay. I want to get back on, like, dang,
Sorry,
you guys.
sorry.
I don't know why we
No,
keep
no,
going on to other topics. Let's stick to the
we'll
topic
leave
at
the
hand.
beauty
I just
We are
wanna-
talking about Lolly
Okay,
and
so-
Vaush.
I just want to
and the
answer
streaming
his
space.
question about my view of it, and that's I don't think, like I said, I think it's immoral. I think, unfortunately, Lolly exists in this gray area where it becomes very difficult to legislate. I think that there's a lot of stuff that we can do on the, like I said, like on the production side, and I think that we should do that. But I think as far as like people possessing it, it's just I don't think that it's fair to be put in jail over just having.
I've already answered that. I've already addressed that multiple times, okay? You sitting at home with a book and with a pen is not the problem. But if you
he's
go to
asking
your
for
computer,
my view of it. I don't.
right? Well,
I'm
I'm
not.
just clarifying that what specifically in regards to Lolly, okay? It's illegal for you to go to your computer, for you to download the image, for you to distribute the image, and for you to buy a manga from the bookstore with the image.
Okay.
That's what's illegal, and that is illegal. That's there's no why I don't understand why we're talking about legislation. There is a piece of legislation. It's the Protect Act of 2003. That's what made it illegal.
Okay. I think we all get that. Okay.
Okay,
My
can I get
apologies for misspeaking. I just believe that it is in such a gray area that I don't agree with that stance.
Okay, can I just
Okay,
give
so
an
is it-
No, we're gonna give
example?
it to Azzy. Go ahead, Azzy.
Okay.
Quickly,
So the
concisely.
obvious-
We got a couple more people I want to get through. So.
The obvious harm of porn is that it majorly affects the brain, right? And I can only assume that he's been watching this stuff since he's a kid, right? Because I don't know many it doesn't beyond what I know. When you are archiving it to this extent, right? You're it shows signs of an addiction, right? And it basically desensitizes you, right? I can already look at his actions as he was just speaking about it so brazenly, so boldly, right? He probably had a community of people around him who thought it was funny, right? To talk about horse peeing and all that. So it's like it goes into dysfunctional anxiety responses, impulsivity, all that. So can we all agree that beyond just lolicon, porn in general is bad for the brain?
I would need a lot of citations for that, but I do think
got
that
one
porn.
right now.
I do think that porn, anything I think that increases dopamine in the brain can be addictive. I don't think it's not necessarily
like
porn
Wick streams, which you should
individually.
like and subscribe to, gang. You're getting that dopamine addiction. You know what? You ain't getting that for free. You should sub to the channel. You should give me some money because I'm better than pornography. Okay, I am better for your brain than
Way
pornography.
better.
Way better.
Yeah.
Azzy, thank you for calling in. Get to your point real quick, because again, I'm trying to hurry this up because again we have limited time.
So now imagine, and here now I can make the harm here. Imagine now that you've trained your brain to have certain certain stimuli around these things, and now when you come around, because all this stuff is made to reflect real people. So if you come around women who look like Lolly or young children, right, who look like this, what do you imagine the responses to be? And I don't foresee a lot of self-control in individuals.
It depends on the person. I would imagine people just have different responses. For example, when I was like, I would guess about 17, I saw some really extreme, like, not real rape porn, but fictional rape porn online, and I didn't want to touch my dick for like a month. It just freaked me out.
Okay.
But then again, there's probably someone who just loves that shit.
And it bleeds into society. It bleeds into education. There's plenty of teachers who've been fired because they had images like this on their personal computers or their work computers. There's been almost every week there's a teacher fired for having sex with a child, a minor. I think this stuff has real implications.
I actually think that stuff might just be a sad fact of what happens when you have adults around minors too much. I don't know whether that necessarily relates to
No. Okay.
Okay,
Azzy,
that's my point.
Yeah, no. Azzy, thank you for coming. I really appreciate you, buddy. And we'll have you if you're free next week on Wednesday. I'm going to have a porn panel, so I want you there.
Yeah, you want me there?
Yeah,
all right, send me a link. Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay. Gang, I just before we bring on our last two callers, I just want to make this clear. It's not just a sad fact that this has to happen. We have to accept it. No, the 0 is what we're going for. 0 incidents. Okay, 0, none, nada, not a 1. I do not accept collateral damage here for this, right? Like I do not. That's the wrong term. But I do not accept that there is a level that we just have to accept. I just don't. But let me bring in the next call. Gene, you're live.
All right, I'm in, right?
You are here. What you got?
So for the Malcolm guy, that's the buzzcut guy, right?
Buzzcut guy? There you go.
That's not a buzzcut, it's a fade. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would have to ask you then, how do you come to terms with stuff like rape porn or incest porn, according to your take on it? Like, if we applied the same standards, would you want all of those people on the list as well?
Yeah. Source. If you're somebody who like gets in, like is not like a CSA, like, or not a CSA, excuse me, like a CNC like role play, if it like goes beyond that, where you're like consuming like violent pornography, like gore porn of people like being raped and like actually hurt, yeah, you should probably be on some kind of list for that for sure.
No, but
incest porn, kind of the same thing. Yeah, if it's like not just like an actress and an actor hired to do it.
Sure, but the problem that we have there is because the CNC shit, by the same standards, is a depiction of rape. It is equivalent to child porn.
No, it involves 2 adults.
Not child porn, but lolly shit.
It involves 2 adults, and the sexual interest is not a child that can't consent. With like CNC roleplay, like you're still consenting to it, but with a child, like the child can never offer consent. Like the target of my sexual like interest is not like in CNC, like it's the fantasy, but I still have issues with CNC. I still think that CNC is pretty unethical and people shouldn't consume it. But if you're watching like violent rape porn, then yeah, you should be like.
I have to say
people should know.
But the fantasy
I misspoke.
About...
Wait 1 second. I misspoke.
Sorry.
I didn't mean child porn. I meant like lolly bullshit, right? I think CNC is a depiction of an act. When people are watching CNC and jacking off to it, they're not jacking off to some people having a talk and consenting to this, right? They are jacking off to the depiction of sexual assault. In the same sense that people that are jacking off to lolly are jacking off to the depiction of child porn.
Yeah, I still think that would be wrong. Yeah.
Go call Dutch.
Okay, have we solved it?
I mean, I just don't get where you're going with this. It just feels like you're trying to take the ultimate moral high ground when the reality is that a lot of people are just into fucked up shit.
Yeah, but the problem with like CP and specifically with Lolly is that that is material that is specifically produced and is specifically produced to desensitize children. That makes them more likely to being raped, as opposed to like rape porn or I guess CNC porn and incest porn that specifically doesn't have an actress and an actor, right? Like that's the difference. It's as Malcolm said earlier. It's about the intent, right? It's about the intent of the creation of the image, like why the image is being posted in the first place. And the reason why the image is being posted in the first place is
sorry.
I have to ask.
it's being posted in the first place to normalize the idea that sexual contact between adults and children is normal.
Why would you assume that?
Why would I what?
Why would you
I think he
assume
has a
that?
point.
Why would I just say that?
No, why would
No,
you
why
assume
would you
that? I'll
assume
translate.
that?
Why would you assume that?
Why would I assume that's why like Lolly is created? Well, I am assuming that based off of the FBI report like in 2002, which says like specifically like how people who abuse and molest children use child pornography. That's why I'm saying that.
Do you think that the creation of Lolly is not for sick freaks to get off, but instead it's like this wider movement to normalize fucking kids?
It can be used in that way. Like Fairy Queen is right in talking about like how a lot of people that are child predators will use like pornographic images to like groom children into thinking that it's normal behavior or that it's safe behavior to engage in. But in general, like if you like a lot of kids, like if you think about it, a little cute like lolly drawing or whatever is going to be a lot more appealing to like a child than like, you know, like violent CP. And it's like, you know, it's easier to get, blah, 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 whatever. So if somebody has all this material and they're intent on grooming a child, the way that they're going to desensitize them to it and normalize them to like the idea of engaging in sexual acts with an adult, like rape, is that they're going to desensitize them by showing them things that they're like open to viewing, essentially.
Okay, so we're like criticizing it on being the basis of child predation, right? It's being used as a tool to help child predation.
It can be used in that way, yeah.
Yeah.
On the same note, then I could say we should ban Discord because that's where most pedophiles are.
Dude, I'm like ready to be Amish at this point. Like you guys have all misbehaved way too fucking much on the internet. I'm not the one to argue that point on.
Okay,
yeah, but we sacrifice some freedom. We sacrifice like some people's. Oh, okay, sorry. Go quick.
Hold on. Gene, are you saying that Discord, right? Discord existing as a platform where things happen, people chat, people talk, people interact, is similar, right? To the depictions of child erotica, which is what Lolly is, right? Cutesy kind of childlike images that are sexualized and engaged in sexual acts. Do you think that these are in any way similar?
What I am saying is that Discord and well, social media in general has probably created more cases of child molestation than Lolicon has. If we want to be more, how do you think people
Well, you just asked us a second ago that like we were making an assumption. I backed up my assumption and Malcolm helped out. Like what are you basing that assumption on? Do you have any proof?
I can provide an example of that, which is Facebook. Facebook has a horrible like CP problem. So
yeah, but that's CP. We're talking about CP Lolly. Like that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is that because of Discord, that there have been far more cases of child molestation or child predation because of Discord, as opposed to the existence of Lolly. I'm asking you to justify that. Do you have a study to back that up?
It is
Any
used,
proof?
As in, it is used as a tool. Well, if I have to bring a study to prove common sense that social media is used as a tool to molest children, then I'm sorry, I don't have here some. I didn't come here.
I'm not denying that, but like you just asked us to justify our assumptions a second ago. I think it's a fair question.
I didn't.
Well, there's other
you to
utility to
justify your
like social media as
assumptions.
well. The only utility of like drawn CP is like to be drawn CP, and the risk of like harming children is like a pretty high risk, especially when something is directly like created for either the consumption of people who think the kids are hot, or for the purpose of like grooming kids into being okay with actual physical contact, like with pedophiles and shit like that. Like that risk seems like way fucking higher, right?
I mean, sure, it seems higher, but at the same time, I think that most people that consume Lolly, most people that consume CNC content, most people that consume all of this weird shit, I think they just do it to get off to it.
If you are more likely to be, I'll take this brave stance. If you consume lolly, you are much more likely to be a child predator than if you just use Discord.
That is true.
Okay, fair enough. And Discord has positive utility, which lolly does not. Discord has positive utility. Lives have been saved because of Discord. There have been medical emergencies, right, where people were in voice chats. They had a medical emergency, couldn't get to the phone, and Discord users were able to call and get rescue vehicles to the location. As far as I'm aware, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, lolly has never saved anyone's life.
Well, I would argue that the pro of lolly is that people get off to it, right?
That's not a utility that I value. You can use other things to get off.
Same.
So, okay, Gene, thank you for calling in, and we got one more call.
Have a good one.
In the discussion. Cool. You're live. You are live.
Am I?
Yep. What you got?
Yep.
Bueller.
Curious what the pro, I guess, lolly content people are saying. I haven't been watching the stream, sadly.
So you didn't
Okay,
watch.
can give me a second? I'll make
no,
a point.
stop it, Joe. I want to think. So you don't know what was said. You have no idea what they were talking
I think your
about.
internet connection is borked, man.
Do you have a question? Do you have a specific question for the panel?
Wait, did someone say my connection was bad?
I don't know.
Can you guys hear me? It was
Yeah,
the
we can hear
𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙
you.
person.
What do you?
Okay, cool.
Yeah, what do you
Fine,
got
I
to
guess
say?
I will say this then, Wick. Anybody, I don't care if it's Wick or food shops, if it's you, Wick, if I find out, or if you ever come out in public, whether it be on stream or on Twitter, and you start saying, hey, I am attracted to animations of children, and you want to see that stuff and that turns you on, and you admit it and you own it, or you run away from it, or you don't, or you try to just ignore it, you should be shunned from all of these online spaces. I don't care who you are. I don't care your excuses. We should not have a risk that bad in these spaces, because lolicon images represent, what do they represent? They represent young people. It's not like just jerking off at a cartoon image means nothing. It's like, it obviously means something, because you're not just going to jerk off to a representation of a child and it not mean anything. So I don't care who it is. It could be literally anybody. It could be someone I think I like. That shit comes out, you should be shunned without exception. You should not be a risk to these spaces.
Okay. Thank you for your call. See you later, Origin. Okay. Yeah, if that ever happened with me, shun me, cancel me. Yeah, but there's no danger of that happening. I'm just not attracted to that kind of. Okay, gang. It has been a show. Thank you all for coming by. Thanks for being a good sport and accepting callers. I know we've gone a little over time. Appreciate that. Tune in tomorrow, where we will have a one-on-one debate between Econoboy and WhickTV. They'll be discussing about welfare and socialized economies. A little bit of a different topic, but tune in nonetheless. We do a variety here, gang. Okay, who we read now? Are any of you still streaming right now? We're gonna stream for.
I'm streaming right now.
On Twitch?
No, not on Twitch though. Sorry.
On Twitch. Anyone streaming?
I'm streaming on Twitch, but I'm only going to be on for like 20 more minutes.
Okay, so I guess we'll go
spare everybody.
rando time. Let's see. We are going to go to Nina. Remember, kids, okay? Be good. Make sure that you turn in tomorrow. I love you all. Goodbye.
Later, Gators.
That was fun.
I'm glad you
Are we
liked
off
it.
stream?
I want to come back.
1 second. I'm
Okay.
still ending. I'm
Oh,
just.
sorry.
No, it's okay. There's one more thing I gotta do. Add redirect. Is anyone that I care about? Oh, 𝕵𝖎𝖎. We'll go to 𝕵𝖎𝖎, sure.
Are we off stream now? Wick?
Hold on. We're about to be.
Well, he's not. He's